So I'd like to welcome you to today's session. My name is Kelly Edwards, and I am a Senior Marketing Manager at KPMG in Ottawa, and we are pleased to be hosting this virtual event today for Willis College. KPMG and Willis College are working together to support the Department of National Defense to deliver cyber operations training to Canadian forces. So we are absolutely delighted to bring you today's Women in Cyber event. Please note that today's session will be recorded. However, none of your personal information as an attendee will be recorded or shared. You will be on mute throughout the session. However, you do have access to the chat function. We encourage you to communicate through the chat function, and if you have any questions at all, please pose them to all attendees. As you'll see, there are a couple of different options, but if you do the all attendees, then we'll ensure that everyone sees your questions and any responses that comes through. As well, in the top right-hand corner, you can see that there's the option to change how you view the panels today. So when we have an individual speaker, you might be interested in keeping the single view. However, as we go into panels, you are welcome to change that to a grid so you can see all of the wonderful presenters that we have today. So with that, I will hand it over to Rima to kick us off for the day. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our annual Women in Cyber and the Future Work event. Even though March 8th is past, I still wanted to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you very happy International Women's Day. I would like to start by acknowledging that currently we are in Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and give my thanks and appreciation to Algonquin Nation. Today also marks exactly 1 year since COVID-19 pandemic started. And I would like to acknowledge all that were victims of this pandemic and say, may they rest in peace. Secondly, I would like to thank our amazing partners, KPMG and the Father AI, for supporting this event. And most importantly, I would like to thank our trailblazers, leaders, movers and the shakers in cybersecurity industry, our presenters and the speakers today. See, 3 years ago, when we first held our global event engaging women in cyber defense, I was honored to have a Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issue a very specific and special video congratulating all of us. Last year and this year, our Christine Lamont was absolutely wonderful to get us another letter from the Prime Minister acknowledging today's event and congratulating each and every one of us. I want to specifically thank her for this amazing work. And I also wanted to say something. Happy birthday, dear. It's Christine's birthday today. So I want to wish you a very happy birthday. And last but not least, I must thank entire Willis College team and a very special thanks to our new National Director of Cyber Strategies and Academic Excellence, Darren Jones. I don't know how Darren did it, but he made this possible within just 3 weeks period. And for that, I'm very grateful and I want to thank you for it. Most of the people in the audience already know Darren. So without further delay, let me give you Darren. Darren, take it from here.
Okay, and thank you very much, Rima. It's an ongoing pleasure to work with you and your team. It's only been 3 months since I've gotten to start here, but it's been an exhilarating time, and especially as you've said in the last few weeks, as we were able to get everyone together for this event. And that's what I found so so exhilarating about pulling together this event was just how enthusiastic and willing everyone was to come in to help us to stage this event. So for all of the attendees, you are in for a really spectacular show today. And we are getting things kicked off with the First Lady of Security, Canada's First Lady of Security, someone that I've known for a few years, Bonnie Butlin, and there's a piece of paper that I have here that has almost all of her accolades written out. To go through all of Bonnie's accomplishments, all of the awards that she's received would take the majority of this event itself. So all I will say is that it's a sheer pleasure to be introducing you for the second time in 2 years, Bonnie, as one of the top 25 women of influence for 2021. And I think another new award since we last saw each other in person was your appointment as a fellow of ISC Squared, which those of us in cyber understand that that's one of the premier organizations associated with our profession. So one of the top people in cybersecurity, Bonnie Butlin.
Thank you so much, Darren and Rima. Am I coming through all right?
Yes, you are, Bonnie. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Again, thanks so much for inviting me today. This is such an important discussion to have, and at a very reflective time, as Rima mentioned. I approach cybersecurity more from a geostrategic background. I'm not a technical expert myself. And so I won't be touching on all the exciting areas of cybersecurity that are coming on, such as AI and blockchain and drones and robotics and everything that goes on with it. But I see some other things coming down the pipe for women in security and for cybersecurity as a whole that I think are interesting. So I'll share a couple things about myself and perhaps a prediction of where we're going. I've been considering and working with women's groups and discussions for a very long time, over a decade now. Actually, this year is the 10th anniversary of the Security Partners Forum, which is our human agile network of security professionals and cybersecurity professionals. So I've been reflecting a lot as well in our 10th year. I've been to a lot of events, run conferences myself, spoken around the world, met women around the world. And so now I think I'm at a point as well where I'm looking at, okay, where are we at with women in cybersecurity? And pre-pandemic, we had moved from including women on panels to having a cybersecurity panel, to having a cybersecurity event or a women in cybersecurity event. And now I think right before the pandemic, we were at a point of, okay, well, but where do we go with this? And how can we really start moving ahead, getting some momentum, getting more women into cyber, really getting some traction? Then the pandemic hit, and we were immersed further into technology and the virtual environment more than we ever have been in the past, I would argue. But some women actually ended up worse off. And that was despite all these efforts over at least a decade. And so it really got me to thinking. So here's the first little secret about myself. Every year I try to watch a documentary interview between Robert S. McNamara, former Secretary of Defense in the US, who served during the Vietnam War, was interviewed by Errol Morris. And he contemplates the Vietnam War and the decisions made during that time in an introspective way. And the interview is set up in a movie called The Fog of War. And I watch it every year. McNamara referenced a poem by T.S. Eliot. And T.S. Eliot wrote his poem, The Little Gidding, during the British air raids. And so it itself was at a contemplative time when people were locked down in their homes during the war, and was delayed because of, again, another pause in our lives. And so he references this poem written during a world war in contemplation of the Vietnam War. And I'll just read a little portion of it. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And that's how I feel right now about women in cybersecurity. That we've looked at this for a decade, we've tried to understand the space, and now with the pandemic experience and what that revealed to us, I think we're now at a place where we can actually look at what will the future of work look like from here and where is it going? During the pandemic too, I think a lot was missed in the media because it took so much of the attention, but the geostrategic frictions actually increased at the same time. And I think that a lot of where the world is going with cyber warfare, hybrid warfare, continuous warfare models that are emerging is also going to play into where women and cybersecurity are going over time. So as we look at this again, I think it's a wonderful time to actually just sit back and reflect a little bit and try to come up with good and better ways to move forward. So when I think of this poem and knowing the place for the first time again, I look at what we've done over the past decade. And I think we have to move away from talking about jobs and positions in cybersecurity in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We have to put more of a face and name and identification of the kind of work and where these jobs are, so that people can actually envision themselves moving into it and understand the workspace in a way that I don't think has really come out even over the last decade of discussions. Meetings like this one today are so important with Willis College because this is where these discussions are happening and the illumination of who the speakers and people working in these spaces are and where it's all going. So I think that's incredibly important. Of course, the professional associations like ISC Squared are so important. And of course, being in the not-for-profit sector, they're often hit hard by the pandemic and economics as well. But I think that's one of the critical pieces is to identify who are the women working in these areas and where are the jobs and trends going. Because women really give a different lens or different window into the kind of work and different regions, different specialties that we don't get in other ways. So I think it has a benefit of its own as well. So as the SPF moved to explore where the women are and where they're working, we started off initially in the Ottawa area, and we were throwing women in security events around 2012, 2013. Then we went global with the Women in Security and Resilience Alliance, which is part of the SPF. And we now work with over 60 plus women in security groups around the world, including in cybersecurity. And through that, we were able to launch in 2020 the Top Women in Security and Cybersecurity Awards around the world, which was able to identify even more women and what they're doing around the world, and to better know and understand what they're doing and how, and collaborate and build capacity internationally. So we launched in Canada with the Top Women in Cybersecurity Awards, Latin America, Africa, India, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Singapore. And this year, just a couple of days ago on International Women's Day, we again launched with IT World Canada the Canadian Women in Security Awards. And so please feel free to nominate yourself or someone else in cybersecurity by April 16th, and you can get the link on the IT World website. In addition to Canada, we also relaunched Latin America and India, and now the ASEAN region, which was actually expanded. So that's just a fantastic way to see what's going on in the rest of the world. So these awards help to not only identify, but unite and connect women around the world. And I think that again helps us understand what's really going on in cybersecurity internationally. And it has had some real benefits for the women involved as well. They've been able to recruit higher profile talent to their organizations. They've received invitations themselves to speak around the world, and et cetera, et cetera. Additionally, in 2020, in July, the SPF launched the Canadian Women in Security Forum, which is an online group to also help identify women in Canada who are working in security and cybersecurity. And since July, even in the middle of a pandemic, and I think this is what's important too, is the momentum that drove these awards and this group of women in security, even during a pandemic, which I think says how badly it's needed. We now have over 2,400 Canadian women in the group who are able to collaborate or identify to speak at events or panels if there's difficulty finding speakers, and so on and so forth. I think it's just been a fantastic response. There's plenty of women out there. At least now we know where they are. We have a community that bridges all the domains of disciplines of security in a way that is going to help expand our networks and the networks of others. And I think this is needed more than ever, because with the pandemic, we did see a number of women leave the profession because either they had to take care of children or they had to take care of family members, school lockdowns, et cetera, et cetera. And we know that in the US, Canada, and the UK in particular, once women in their middle years leave the profession, they're not getting recruited back. And it's difficult to come in from mid-career in many cases. And so this kind of networking and understanding who's out there may also alleviate that element of the talent gap and recruitment and retention issues. But if I go back to the poem and going back to the start, how can we rebuild cybersecurity and the sector in a way that's going to be most helpful? And I think we learned a few things from the pandemic. It's that we weren't as resilient as we had hoped, that we did lose a lot of businesses. We did have problems with business continuity over such a long period of time. Budgets were put under stress. We saw interventions by governments at many levels that were much more granular and enduring than could have been anticipated by many organizations. And this has put more pressure onto security budgets as well. The lockdowns also stretched employees. We saw attrition from the sector as people had to take care of other matters at home. And some of the winners were big tech, but that may have actually reduced competition in some ways in the space. So there were wins and losses in the pandemic, and I think it's going to take a long time to sort out where we land on it overall. But I think we were immersed in technology more than ever, and women in some cases did worse. And so the need to attract more talent to the sector and to be able to retain it became highlighted more than I had anticipated at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think if we can draw one conclusion, it's that attracting enough talent to the sector is not enough. I think we may have to structurally address the cybersecurity sector itself in terms of being a stable and imposing more certainty on the space to make it a safer career choice for a lot of people. It's a great career. There's so much potential in it, but people are looking for financial stability and not a lot of risk or churn in the sector. And cybersecurity just inherently is very high risk, lots of attacks, frequently more sophisticated, requires much training over time, over your whole career. There are often startup venture models, startup models that are often, companies are quickly sold off. There isn't necessarily a long-term business strategy or a strategy for retention of employees over time. So I think there are things we can do potentially to attract more people to the sector than we're attracting now. It's a high-risk sector. Only so many percentage of the general population is a high-risk population that would go into the field. We may have to make the sector more moderate risk so that we can attract a larger portion of the society into this field and into this area and keep them there. And that may require some adjustments to how cybersecurity companies, research is funded in Canada in a way that makes it a little more stable, a little more predictable than it is today. So we need a lot more people. And I think that's the thing. The talent gap, after a decade at least, has still not been closed, no matter how much we seem to attract the talent. There's so much out there. But the way that the cyber landscape is going, we're going to need a lot more talent. And to do that, I think we may need to adjust widen the net, perhaps, of who we can bring in. And I think it's going to be more important in a geostrategic perspective moving forward. So in that sense, rebuilding is going to be incredibly important. The networking is going to continue to be important. And funding models and sustainability within the sector, I think, is going to be an important investment. In the future, and if we go back to thinking about the T.S. Eliot poem. How does this flow into the future now? And I think we need to scale out and scale up in terms of the talent pool, which has been this difficult problem over time, and it may be in the recruitment, retention, funding models that may be tweaked. So another little secret about myself is I started 30 years ago, it's a long time, in strategic studies and containment theory and grand strategy. And I feel like my career as well has gone full circle. I have a prediction to make, and I think that the careers in cybersecurity are going to follow the geostrategic frictions and tensions that we're seeing more and more of, even during the pandemic. And that these convergences of geostrategic frictions, increase in cyber warfare, increase in the models and types of warfare that are being engaged in, whether it's Western models, American way of warfare today, or the Russian style, for example, the Primakov doctrine with the General Gerasimov operationalization of it with a hybrid cyber approach, low cost, effective, asymmetric, and continuous over time, or other models. We're going to have to adapt to that. And I think that's going to take, again, the larger workforce in cybersecurity that's going to blend across STEM and social sciences, international affairs, international law. And all of these are opportunities for women to join into, as well as everyone else, joining into the cybersecurity collaboration and work together, because that's the way I think the geostrategic landscape is going. And we can't keep in our silos or technical versus social sciences. I think we're going to see a blending of it over time. And as we're rebuilding the sector, we may be able to get more of women's perspectives and more women in at the ground level this time, and have a better balanced and more joined up approach moving forward. I think we're seeing a lot of this happening. In particular, over the last 30 years, we've seen a real move away from grand strategy by Western states since the end of the Cold War onward. Whereas, for example, Russia and China have moved much more heavily into grand strategy. And we see it in professional security as well, that we're seeing in the West more organic private sector development of professional security, for example, within the private sector. The sophistication and strategic development of professional security is happening almost organically in the Western states. You see it with IT security convergence, organizational resilience, a more sophisticated approach to cyber defenses and business continuity, I would argue. Whereas in, for example, Russia and China, we're seeing a much more state-driven laws coming into place that are treating professional security in a much more strategic way that is integrating it top to bottom. For example, Russia with their strategic planning and laws requiring strategic planning across all levels of government is something that we just, I think in the pandemic saw was missing here in Canada. It's just a different approach, but I think over time we're going to have to blend the two to be able to come to peaceful resolutions of conflicts over time. And I think that the women in security role there and the role of cybersecurity generally is going to be meshing much more closely with the international affairs, diplomacy, and other areas together moving forward. So I see a lot of potential. It's complex, it's strategic, but I think in the West, we were developing that way organically. In other areas of the world, it was developing top down. And I think as we exit the pandemic, we're going to see that we're going to have to interface in that manner with cyber thrown into the mix because of the development of the different models of warfare today. So I think it's a really interesting time. And I think the time for contributions and the potential for new positions in defense, in intelligence, in international affairs, diplomacy, and integrating it with cybersecurity at all levels and across the public sector and private sector is just huge potential right there. So with that, I think we're really getting into interesting times. And I think that pandemic, as bad as it was, is a time to really consider how we're working in cybersecurity, what we can do better at this point, and how we have to adapt and improve in other areas and integrate further between social sciences and STEM, which was long discussed, but not often very well implemented. So with that, I'll leave that. And I don't know if you have time for questions or I'll be around for the rest of the afternoon. But thank you so much. And I think a very good discussion to follow as well.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie. And I've seen you speak so many times, and every single time you bring different nuances and different ways to think about some of the challenges that we face in the world of cybersecurity. And up until just last year, when I started working with REMA on the Canadian Armed Forces training, I had always viewed cybersecurity from the commercial perspective. So, your leadership and insights around what cyber means to defense have really helped to inform a lot of our dialogues at Willis College. So again, thank you. And let me see, we do want to get Helen set up to go soon, but there is a question from one of the attendees, and it'll be my voice, so apologies for that. But it often feels, as a woman in cyber, that you need to do more in order to stand out compared to others. What do you recommend that will help a graduate woman in cybersecurity stand out?
Right, and this is something that I've thought about before too. I think there are some similarities with burnout rates that people working in cybersecurity may be more prone to, just like in the military or policing. We often find that women burn out faster because they have to work that much harder just to be considered on par with their peers. And I'm hoping that if we can get a larger pool recruited and retained, if we can stabilize the sector enough to draw more people to it in a way that's not so high risk or uncertain over a whole career, I'm hoping we can get enough critical mass of people into the space that will ease over time and we won't have that level of burnout, I would hope.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really good response. And actually, the response to that question is a much more effective segue than I could ever come up with from your keynote address. And thank you again, Bonnie, to our next talk, which will involve Dr. Helen Tang, someone else that I only really started to work with last year because of REMA. And Dr. Tang is a senior defense scientist and portfolio manager with the DG Innovation Defense R&D Canada Research Agency. By the name, you can tell that this is a body that is associated with the Department of National Defense. And similar to Bonnie, she is one of the top people in cyber altogether, in that she has received, again, a very lengthy list of awards, but I see awards from bodies such as the IEEE for her Outstanding Achievement Awards, Best Paper Awards, and with the focus that she's had on areas relating to wireless security issues, connected modes of transportation, smart cities, and connected medical devices, Dr. Tang is, far and away one of the thought leaders in our industry. And she's here to speak to us about global developments on engaging women in cybersecurity. I guess I could have been reading it from the slide rather than the paper. Please, Dr. Tang.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Thanks, Rima and Darren and KPMG for the invitation for this great event. This is my second time to attend this event. It's my honor to speak again. This topic is very dear to my heart. As you, thanks to Darren's introduction, I entered the university in 1988. Sorry, disclose my age. And at that time was one of very few people in the computer science class. And I did all the way to master, PhD, all in the science and engineering field. So I have witnessed the growth of women into this fascinating field. And also I have two daughters who are grade 11 and grade 5. I definitely encourage them to get more familiar with this great field. And last year, thanks to Rima, she brought her 9-year-old granddaughter to talk about her online slime shop. I thought that was a very great idea and was one of the highlights of that night. And all the best to your granddaughter, Rima. So I had done lots of, during my work life, I had interact with internationally all kind of program in engaging women in cybersecurity. I myself has volunteered to go to the community or school to talk about, as I want to set myself as a role model to attract more people to enter this exciting field. It's not that all people with hoodies and then, you know, geeks behind the computer. So there's more to that. So, so next, please. So this is the table content of my talk today. So first, I will very briefly talk about the benefits and the challenges of engaging women in cyber. And then there's lots of initiative around the globe to address this important topic. Here, I will just briefly introduce some of them from UK, Israel, US, and Canada, and what are the lessons learned from our partners and what can be done in the future. Next, please. Oh yes. So the benefits we probably all clearly understand, or maybe not. For me, there's three main benefits. First is we need both boys and girls to enter the field. It helped to bring different perspective to the table, and then they can change the status quo, which only this picture shows that what are the currently states how many women in cybersecurity. It's only 20% even in the 2019. Then there's lots of job shortage in 2021. Estimate 3.5 million. So definitely, if we can bring more people in this field, we can fill the gender gap or labor shortage. Another one is to provide learning and growth opportunity for women. The challenge is, as mentioned briefly before that, it's the perception. Lots of people view cybersecurity is not a viable career path for women. Maybe they only suitable for very techie people. Actually, the cybersecurity is very bring a broad range of opportunity. You can still show your industry design, your creativity, all kinds of talent to contribute in this promising field. Another one is because the reality is it is a male dominant culture. It's not that our male partner is intentionally discriminate, but because we are the minority, so sometimes you will feel intimidated somehow. So how we can break those barriers is some challenge that we need to address. So in short, that I think the solution is education, education, education. It's like the real estate when talk about location, location, location. For to address this thing, I think it's really education plays the #1 roles. And then also need to start early. If we only talk about in the workforce, it's already too late. Like for my daughter, one is grade 11, grade 5. Since grade 3, I introduced my younger daughter to the code sports, because when I look at my elder daughter's class, there's still only one kid in the software engineering class. So if we get them more interested in the STEM, in the coding from the early age, then they will have much more interest, involvement in the future. Next, please. Here is the review agenda from last year. Last year, I also very fortunately invited to some representative from Israel and UK to talk about their programs on this topic, and we also invited the DG Security from Public Safety Canada to talk about Canadian cyber strategy. This year, right after our event, the pandemic happened, right? So during the past year, this actually brings a lot of new challenge. However, it's also brought some great opportunities. We are not only survived, but we try to thrive, because the COVID-19 and more people work from home has accelerated the appetite for coding education and cybersecurity. So I think the education in this field and the discussion on this topic become more important, more than ever. Next, please. So as mentioned, there are many initiatives to engage women or girls in cybersecurity around the world. Here, we list a few of them. From UK has been a leader in this field. That's why last year we invited some UK representative talk about their program. One thing is, in 2014, Britain is the first GH country to introduce compulsive computer science on the school curriculum for all children aged 5 to 16. I thought that's a very good move. And then 3 years ago, UK had this National Cybersecurity Center, which Canada follows suit too. We have this Canadian National Center on Cybersecurity as well. And they did something very interesting is on education, is to call the Cyber First. It is a program to help people from age 11 to 17 to explore their passion for tech by introducing them to the cybersecurity. So the picture on the top shows the program from age 11 to 17, and then different program along the pipeline. And then among those pipeline, there is one is dedicated for girls. So it has Cyber First Girls competition, because if they have like a general competition, however, they want to foster the interest of the girls, to don't want them be intimidated by some so they had this set up for only girls competition, which had very good impact, that they had attracted, since 2017 they had attracted 37,000 girls from across UK to participate this competition. I would dare to imagine that if it was not for this girls only competition, that they will have less participation for girls. So I think that's a good lesson to learn. Yeah. So next one is Israel. Last year we also have a representative from Israel to talk about their program on cyber girls. You all know that Israel is very, very into technology and startup culture. So their Department of National Defense also heavily invested and support this initiative, Cyber Girls. They had organized, sponsored or supported the club and community to host the girls only hackathon, training sessions, meetup and events, so that the girls can get advice and guidance from the mentors, from the ladies that are already in this field, and many of them are from the military. Next, please. In US, of course, it has many more initiatives. There are two that really I want to highlight. One is Girls Go Cyber Start. It was provided by SANS Education. If you know this field, you will all know that that's a very prestigious training institute, SANS. They supported this Girls Go Cyber Start. They designed some curriculum to help people from A to Z, like to get to know this field and become expert. And UT Dallas Cybersecurity Research Institute established the Center for Engaged Women in Cybersecurity. So maybe next year we will invite them to talk about what they have done in this specific topic. And then Girls Who Code was originally started in US but then become a national or international organization, nonprofit organization. Canada and then UK, they all have their local organization. So their goal is very ambitious, but it's quite inspiring. It's to close the gender gap in new entry-level tech policing by 2027. Next, please. Yeah, now back to our home country, Canada. Canada also have some exciting development happened last year. One is the Ontario setup announced in July 2020 to include the coding in the new math curriculum from grade 1. That's quite exciting. It's echoes what my thinking that we need to start early. And then I want to mention that the Cyber Girls Ambassador program hosted in the Ontario Technology University is also very, very good. And also the Hatch coding, if you haven't heard about it, you may have heard about the Scratch coding. It's a tool. And then the Hatching Coding is a Canadian startup company. They have provide a library of 600 projects and provide a certificate from grade like level 1 to expert level. So here is a user testimonial. If you have a girl, help them try that. Next, please. Yeah, so in summary, that the lesson learned from all the initiatives is again back to that education. What we can do is to break the barrier, to decrease the misconception that the cybersecurity field is only for techies and it's male dominant. Women, we bring different perception, and we have lots of talent to offer in this exciting field. We don't want to miss out this opportunity because of some stigma or misconception, and then start early. I'm really applaud the Ontario move to include the coding in the grade 1, start from grade 1. And I want to say that girls do learn differently sometimes. So when we have those girls only competition, and especially introduce mentorship, and then to foster that interest from the early and tender age, that will be harvest better in the future. And also the public-private partnership is always very, very important in this. So I heard that Willis and then the D&D is doing this good partnership. I think this event happen here cannot be better, in a better place to thanks for this organization. And then also I want to say we need the support from our male colleagues, especially to encourage your daughters, sisters, and girlfriends to explore this exciting field. And then finally is the opportunity for future work. This pandemic had really opened out lots of people's eyes that work from home, the network, increased the appetite for coding education and the cybersecurity. So I would imagine in the next few years, more and more women will be more interested in this field and then join the more workforce to explore this promising future. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Tang, for that really engaging walkthrough of some of the important developments that have been happening from around the world. And what's especially appealing to us to see is that well, you know, and others who are attending this event will know with the concluding presentation, but you know, we at Willis do have a rapidly emerging global perspective that we're bringing into elements of our training program, but also elements of the sorts of partnerships that we're establishing. And Deborah had posted a question to all of the panelists. We do have a couple of minutes, and would you like me to read the question, or would you prefer to read the question yourself,
Sure.
Dr. Tang? Okay, I'll read it. Deborah's indicating that the message that we're hearing here in this event and from certification and training organizations is that there is a need for women and a diverse workforce to be pulled into cybersecurity. However, need is different from appetite to make this happen from the leadership of different organizations. You know, who is and who should be making these leadership and culture changes happen to support the growth. Because I think we've seen from your presentation, Dr. Tang, that the need is being developed very early to provide the training that's necessary to, in the future, you know, release all of these outstanding candidates into the higher education streams and into the workforce. But if the leadership in organizations isn't looking to talent from those sorts of sources, how do we help to foster that appetite?
That's actually a very good question. We have done, actually, Willis and D&D had done a good study 2-3 years ago to address why is less women than men enter the cybersecurity field. And then they have made some good suggestions, and then how to make that into reality, right? It's a slow process, but the public and private partnership plays an important role here. We have witnessed that UK had established the National Cybersecurity Center, and Canada right after that. So we do have a National Cybersecurity Center right now, and then it is the interface between the government and public on this topic. And then we have a National Cybersecurity Strategy, and then how to include that more, you attract more women. It depends on event like this. We need all of us to work together to let our management know that it is important. Let the data speak. Let the data speak. So we need this many workforce. If we don't increase our supply, we won't meet the demand, right? So, and then in the end, when they realize that we are short on the labor skill, the labor gap, then they have to do something. So I think that drive will gradually come into place. I am confident on that. Yeah.
And one more question, just a personal question, and it's not personal for me. Again, a question that was forwarded to me. What would you say, Dr. Tang, that inspired you to get into this field? And how did you find your career journey, especially, the technical aspects of the field being so male-dominated back in those days?
That's so. I will share my personal experience a little bit in 1 minute, I guess. My father is a professor in mathematics and computer science, so I have the background. So he encouraged me to enter this field. In 1988, that's internet is not that popular yet. So I first started computer science, and then I did a PhD in computer networks, and then joined the Department of National Defense, and then saw the security become so important. So all these skills are quite transferable, I would say. Your logic, your mathematics, your analysis, your problem solving, it's all transferable. So actually, this lady asked for the PhD study. I think the ability, the learning skill, the problem solving skill is the most important thing. When you have that, when you master that, you can apply for different kind of program, different problem. So the problem we are facing today may well be different from in 10 years. However, when you gain the confidence that you can solve the problem, you can learn new things, you can try it. Like really, it's when you see the opportunity, just grasp it. It's no be there and fearless. I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that's a really outstanding message, just for everyone, not in cyber but in life, to grab the opportunities and be fearless about it. So thank you so much, Dr. Tang, for
thanks again for inviting
sharing your perspective. So we're delighted to have you speak with us again. And Certainly, for all attendees, don't hesitate to make note of the questions. We may not be able to get to all of your questions today, but we will certainly, document what these questions were and, engage perhaps at a future point in time with all of our panelists and speakers. And speaking of people who seize opportunity and are fearless about it, I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, the Chief Operating Officer at Willis College, Ramona Buda. And Ramona is someone who comes to us with a background growing up in communist Romania, where she was a very avid reader. And she shared a couple of stories with me about, how she discovered that she had a passion for education. I will let her share some of those stories rather than re-articulating them myself. But over the last 20 years, Ramona has lived in various places throughout Canada, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. She comes to us at Willis College through our parent company, Summit 2. And she has been instrumental in the various transformations that have been taking place at Willis College to allow us to expand across the country. And it's through her career path where, she discovered that she has a flair for business, a flair for entrepreneurship, and a passion for education, that she decided to build a career that integrates the very best of business and the very best of education. So I'm delighted to introduce Ramona.
Thank you very much, Darren. This forum is off to a great start. Rima, Bonnie, Dr. Helen Tang, what a powerhouse team, I have to say. I'm really, truly humbled and honored by the opportunity to present alongside you. And I'm so excited to hear from Dr. Tang's presentation that Ontario is now including coding as part of grade 1 curriculum. I have a grade 10 daughter. She's attending grade 10, I should say. And there was no curriculum for computers, as far as I'm aware, up until grade 10. So of course, as someone who's highly involved in the cybersecurity program at Willis, this year I really recommended that as one of her options that she takes computers, which of course she did. I mean, if mom is going to push her to do something, she eventually decided to go ahead and do it. But I have to say that it was almost like pushing a 15-year-old to start to learn the piano. You need to do it at an earlier age. So needless to say that she gave her best effort, and at the end of the 3 months, because here in Alberta we learn in quarters now, she basically said, Mom, stop talking to me about cyber. I'm not getting it. I am too old for this. So how sad to hear that a 15-year-old thought she's too old for this. So Dr. Tang, your research that you're doing, your suggestion that we need to start educating our kids, particularly the girls, early on, so they can start developing that love for computers, for coding, for cybersecurity. I think your research is very correct. When Rima first asked me to speak at the Women in Cyber Forum, I was reluctant. After all, I can barely spell cybersecurity. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out if it's one word or 2 words. But have you ever tried saying no to Rima? She's the most powerful and persuasive woman that I know, so saying no to her was not even a choice. So here I am talking to you today, not about the importance of women in cyber, which is undeniable, as we've heard over and over already during this event, but more about the importance of education, and more precisely, the role that a career college played in reaching my dream. As Darren very kindly mentioned, I grew up in communist Romania. And I do wonder how many here grew up in the communist or in a developing country. You know, go ahead and write it in the chat section, the country where you were raised in. Do we have anyone here that was born or raised in China, Cuba, Russia, Poland? Yes, exactly, Rima, coming from Georgia. But I'm not going to bore you with the hardship that growing up in a communist country entails. That's not what this conference is about. But I do want to say that both of my parents only had a grade 8 education. I know it's hard to believe, but grade 8 was all that they achieved. And that's really because the Communist Party in Romania needed young people to work in the hundreds of factories across the countries. So higher education was not encouraged. But as simple and uneducated as my parents were, they did love to read. And I remember that there were countless nights that we would sit around the kitchen table reading at the dim light of a candle. And no, for those of you that think that the candle was for a calm ambience, that was not the case. Sometimes we did not have electricity in the evening, so the light of the candle was it. But I already said that I won't go down the road of how tough life was during the communist era. My point is that through instilling a love for reading, my parents provided me with an opportunity to really realize that other countries encourage education. And I vouch that one day I will leave Romania and I will go and live in one of those countries where people are encouraged to study, to go and get their degrees. But I do feel like I'm getting a little carried away with my story. And I don't want you to think that growing up in Romania was an awful experience, because it truly wasn't. We didn't have much, but we created great memories. I vividly remember playing school with other kids. And I know that our kids now, they play with computers and they play games and Nintendos, but that's what we did growing up. And I'm sure that many of you on this call, you too played school. And because I was always the teacher, my dad painted an area of the fence with black paint so I could use it as a blackboard. The kids from the neighborhood would come over and would be sitting in the grass, would listen to my lecture about the latest book I read. So saying that I developed a passion for teaching from a young age is a little bit of an understatement. I'm going to fast forward to the fall of Communist Party and my opportunity to come to Canada. Although I had pursued an education to become a teacher, I knew that the road to being a teacher here in Canada was not going to be easy. What I did not expect, however, was to be told by a large university in British Columbia, where I was living at the time, that I needed to start from scratch. I needed to register to the adult high school so I can work on my prerequisites in order to enroll into the Bachelor of Education. I'm sure my story would resonate with many on this call. As a new Canadian with only a few dollars in my pocket, I simply couldn't imagine how I would support myself through 4 or 5 years of education. I was quite heartbroken and disappointed. Actually, to be very honest, I was angry. I was angry that how many of you here on this call have felt that you achieved a dream only to find out that it's not exactly like you imagined. And that dream for me was to come to Canada and for the doors of education to open and to learn that I actually have to take a few steps backwards before I can move forward. It was disappointing. I do remember walking down the street and literally asking myself, well, now what, Ramona? You can't go to school. What are you going to do in this new country? And I barely spoke English. I had an education that had no value in Canada and did not know what I should be doing next. Walking down the street is when I noticed a little sign saying Barnaby College. And I'm not sure if I'm a glutton for punishment, but I decided to go in. I was able to sit down with an admissions advisor and I shared with him my frustration that not only was my education not recognized in Canada, but it wasn't even sufficient to get me admitted into the university. So he said that he can help me. And I have to say that what happened next is very much a blur. I left Barnaby College that day with an enrollment contract into the medical office administration program. I didn't even know what a medical office administrator truly does, but that was not important to me. I was going to be a student again. I was accepted to go to school, and my faith in Canada had been restored all in one day. But my excitement was quickly extinguished by well-meaning people. Because I was too new to Canada and I wouldn't qualify for the government student loan at the time, I did have to go to the bank to secure a student line of credit. And a well-intentioned banker told me that I should consider going to another school and that private career colleges have a bad reputation. I couldn't quite understand why he's telling me that, because in Europe, private colleges are seen as superior to public schools. So in my own head, I was going to be attending a superior school. I simply wasn't understanding what he was trying to tell me. So I decided to carry on, and even when other people told me that I'm making a mistake by attending a school that charges a higher tuition than a public college, I was determined to get an education. So 10 months later, I did graduate with honors, and I secured employment in that field of studies with Canadian Blood Services. That, I have to say, was just the first step for what was going to become my education journey. 10 years later, I did further my education and I completed a bachelor's degree. And for those of you that are wondering, no, I did not go to the university that told me that I cannot get admitted into their program. And later on, I pursued an MBA degree. But to this day, I know that this wouldn't have been possible if that little career college didn't take a chance of me. And if that admissions advisor was not as persuasive as he was, taking the time to explain to me that even newcomers to Canada do stand an opportunity, and I didn't have to go and retake high school credits. Today, I have a career that marries both of my passions. Like Darren said, very passionate about education, as I'm sure you gathered from my story. But I am also passionate for business. And I wake up every morning feeling grateful that I have an opportunity to marry both of these passions. I do, however, often ask myself, where would I be if I listened to those that told me not to attend a private career college? That the education that I received at a career college is not good enough. What if my quest for education stopped when I was told that I will never find employment with a career, with a diploma from a career college? Where would I be? So after telling you my life story, I want to leave you with one last thought. As Benjamin Franklin said, an education is the investment with the greatest return. And no matter where this education is coming from, if it is our parents or our grandparents, the public or the private school system, it is important to continue to learn. I have made it my mission to try and change the perception that career colleges provide substandard education. Those of you that have employed our Willis College graduates, you know that that's not the case. And I do want to provide education opportunities to those that don't fit that mold of the public colleges and universities, because there is a role for the public universities, there is a role for the private schools. And as such, it is with great pride that I announce that Willis College is offering the Women into Technology Scholarship. This scholarship initiative was undertaken to empower women and to help recruit new talent into the rapidly growing sector of cybersecurity. One annual scholarship will be awarded starting this year. The scholarship will be open to qualified female students from across Canada who do require financial assistance in order to enroll in one of our Willis College technology programs. So those programs include our help desk and network technology, our cybersecurity operator, cybersecurity analyst diploma. Each of these scholarships will cover tuition costs, books, materials, industry certifications, and anything that is related to the successful applicant's program of choice. Applications will be accepted starting on May 1st. So those of you that are thinking about applying for a scholarship, mark your calendars, May 1st. And the application process will close on July 15th. The evaluation and award process will take place annually by the Women into Technology Board of Trustees who administer this scholarship. The successful applicant will be announced in early August, and more information will be forthcoming on our website on March 1st, and that's www.williscollege.com/scholarship. Darren, over to you. Thank you for your attention, your participation. It's been great to have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about my life story and to announce this great scholarship.
Thank you very much, Ramona. And that scholarship, of course, is a very exciting development for Willis College. And I have a feeling that when the scholarship award is announced, we may have another event forthcoming, although perhaps more limited than the 3.5-hour event that today is, because we certainly would want to celebrate the person who gets awarded that scholarship and gets launched into the education cycle that will bring them a spectacular career. And with that point of transition, we will shift from a talk from one of the Willis College senior executive leaders, and very encouraging and really fascinating combination of factors that led Ramona to model an extremely successful career in business, to one of our Willis graduates who is just embarking on a career in cyber. Sherry Papin graduated from the Willis College CyberSecurity program just recently, but what's especially exciting about her graduation is that she's showing that in some cases, a person can make an interpretive turn in their career and pick up a set of new skills and integrate life experience and experiences from the first part of her career to really get launched into becoming a trailblazer of success in cybersecurity. One other element of Sherry's graduation is that she is the first Indigenous women in technology graduate from the Willis College programs. And being local to the Ottawa area, we of course had an event, this being the big we. This is not the we including Darren Jones. I had no involvement with Willis at that point in time, but a fantastic event that took place to celebrate Sherry's graduation, which involved recognition from the MP, recognition from the MPP, just an outstanding event. And Sherry, I'm delighted to turn this over to you, and I greatly enjoyed the conversations that we had leading up to today.
Thank you so much, Darren, for that wonderful announcement speech. Thank you so much. So this basically brings me into my my event, my story of my life, basically what led me to where I am today. So one woman's journey into cyber, presented by myself. Hello, my name is Sherry Papin, and I was honored to be asked to talk a little about myself and the journey to become a woman in cyber. What I'll be covering in this little presentation is basics of who I am and where I came from and what led me here. I'm also happy to speak to how great people at Willis College helped me and where my new career has started, and a sneak peek at where I am going. So basically, I'm a mother of 3, proud military spouse, and a recent high honors graduate from Willis College cybersecurity analyst program. I was a single mother at 16 years old. Let me tell you, that was not easy. It was challenging to find a balance with going to school, looking for employment, and being a full-time mom. I met my spouse years later in Petawawa, Ontario, shortly after he was posted there, and he became my support system. We're a blended family now, and I became a mother of 3. Next slide, please. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. How did I get here? After I graduated high school in Fort College, Quebec, I continued my studies at l'Institut Collégial, where I took préposé au service de soutien personnel, otherwise known as nursing assistant. Did I mention I'm also bilingual? I also studied to become a massage therapist in Gatineau at Académie de Massage et d'Orthothérapie. I also studied to be a private investigator and a security guard at Iron Horse Security and Investigations. I wanted to challenge myself to do things I had no previous experience with growing up. Working as a private investigator, I enjoyed learning about how investigations and digging up information on others to support evidence for my reports and to get that proof. I had a knack for getting people to tell me what I wanted to know without them knowing they had already told me what I wanted to know. Sometimes it's being sneaky, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to learn more, and my drive and initiative is what led me to make that complete 360 turn to return to school again. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, private investigating and security was not actually my day job. I was a healthcare worker for 16 years first, and before looking at Willis College. From such a crazy job history, I eventually graduated from Willis College CyberSecurity Analyst Program, and I'm currently employed at Two Keys Operations as a Security Operations Center operator. During my first year at the college, I was even lucky enough to attend a seminar. It's called An Introduction to Digital Evidence Collection, Processing, and Forensics Analysis in Incident Response and Investigations. Dennis Roussel was the presenter for that. It just goes to show you never stop learning and it's forever evolving. Next slide. So why choose cybersecurity? After 16 years of working multiple jobs simultaneously, generally feeling exhausted, overly burnt out, I wanted to feel accomplished and proud of my career path. I wanted to feel challenged. So I decided to take the leap of faith to better myself and provide a better future for my family. Well, I was very proud of my daughter for enrolling at University of Ottawa during her last few months of high school. I believe that this was the time to start looking at schooling employment options of my own to achieve my goal, which is when I found Willis College. I was a bit nervous going back to school. I met with the admissions personnel, and at first I was looking at doing executive business administration and HR specialist course. I was offered lots of other career paths as well. And when I saw the document on the cybersecurity analyst program, I surprised the recruiter by saying, all right, I'll take this program. I was able to meet with one of the program instructors and decided I absolutely wanted to do this. I always had a love for mysteries and sticking up for the little guy, hence the training to be a security guard and as well as a private investigator. So I signed up for the program. I took the cybersecurity analyst program at Willis College and graduated with high honors in July 2020. My passions and interests collided when I discovered the world of penetration testing and digital forensics. After the seminar presented by Dennis Rousseau, I knew then what I wanted to become after graduation, a forensics analysis and a penetration tester, also known as ethical hacker. This was the best decision I ever made for myself to return to school for a more rewarding career. So by doing that, I achieved something that I never thought I could do or would. I was afraid to take the risk and to better my life, and I am extremely grateful and that I took the leap of faith. Next slide, please. So how did that go? The first few weeks, I have to say, was a bit frustrating with trying to understand the material. After all, I had pretty much no computer experience, but being a hacker sounded really fun. The faculty and instructors were knowledgeable. They always pushed us to do our best and surpassed even our own expectations. When COVID-19 hit and forced us to go online in this unprecedented time, the Ottawa campus faculty stepped up and ensured our learning was minimally impacted. I must say, it wasn't easy for the instructors nor the students to go online. However, it opened up more possibilities for people who really wanted to return to school and still look after their families, giving a solid option for a more diverse learning environment. Willis College is very dedicated to helping their students succeed during the program and after graduation. When I found myself struggling with some subjects, they ensured that I got the help I needed and provided the tools needed for my success, which in my case was an amazing tutor. They are understanding and try to help you in any which way, shape, or form to help you achieve your goals. Applying for jobs within a pandemic, virtual job interviews weren't easy. If anything, it made things more challenging for everyone involved. Thankfully, the Willis team was up for the challenge, and despite a lot of waiting for HR staff to be available, I was eventually matched up with a great first job to start my new career. Next slide. So, my own marketing. Well, during my last 2 weeks of school, the Willis College Ottawa campus team found out that I was the first Indigenous student graduating CyberSecurity Analyst program at Willis. I was surprised to be asked if I could be marketed, but I absolutely agreed and helped throughout the whole process. Check out that picture. That marketing program was posted on social media, highlighted on LinkedIn, giving me an amazing platform to job hunt from. Next slide, please. So my achievements. I received congratulatory letters from the MP and MPPs of Renfrew County District, and I was the first ever recipient of the Willis College Medal for my achievement of graduating with high honors as the first Indigenous woman cybersecurity from Willis College. To add to that, they further marketed me by having me interviewed for a blog by Brandedly Communication. All of this was nothing short of amazing and frankly overwhelming. So my next slide, please. So Miss Rima Aristocrat made this all possible. She is one incredible woman advocating for women everywhere to come and join the Women in Technology movement, and she encourages us to not be afraid to take that step and engaging more women into technology industry. A special thanks to the woman who empowered many other women like myself to step up and to talk about my experiences to help guide the current students and many others to come. Thank you so much, Ms. Rima Aristocrat, for all that you've done and for taking the extra time to mentor me through my transition into a bright new future. Thank you. I recently accepted a job at 2 Keys as a security operations center operator, and I have had the pleasure of working with some amazing coworkers who have mentored me along the way. 2Keys operates and manages digital identity platform and cybersecurity platforms through professional service agreements, otherwise known as big contracts. They are a 24/7, 365-day security operations center and service desk. Their mission statement is confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy. I'll elaborate a little bit more about 2Keys and what they offer, as well as my personal experience thus far. They offer a wide variety of opportunities for growth and development, such as a positive atmosphere, mentorship, and this industry's ever-evolving education. My experience has been rewarding thus far, as we all help each other, guide each other, working together, while truly defining the word teamwork, along with practicing good communication. Every employment will have its ups and downs. The ups being growing my knowledge and skills, learning more and more every day. Downs being it's not easy to work shift work on occasions, but I still find the good in it. Next slide. So my future goals. What my future goals are for the future. I'm looking at climbing that corporate ladder and overcoming every obstacle to achieve my goals. My plan is to attain critical certifications in the months and years to come, and build on every evolving skill needed to keep those wascally hackers out of our systems. My core belief is keep moving forward and never give up on learning, no matter how hard it gets. Next slide, please. This brings us to the end of my presentation. In summary, I would like to say that men and women should not be afraid to step out of their comfort zone and embrace a better future. Take the next step into something great. I truly believe that we need more women in technology to step up and take that next challenge, show the world what we are made of. I'd also like to say thank you for all the event organizers and everyone that made this possible. And of course, thank you for listening to my story.
Well, thank you, Sherry. That was a very inspiring story of your journey to get to this point. And wow, what can I say now? Now I'm going to say the thing that that I was not going to say at the beginning of your talk, which is, you know, for the audience out there, Sherry, this was your very first presentation ever of a sort like this, and I just have to say, wow! It's not just me saying that. A couple of people have sent me text messages relating the same thing, especially when I let them know about this being your inaugural speech. So very well done. And one of the really great questions that I've seen float up on the chat is just the, well, congratulations on your continued resilience, continued self-renewal. What motivated you to keep taking courses? How did you find the energy to do that, working so many jobs?
So to answer that question, after so many years of doing 4 or 5 jobs at a time, working healthcare and being so burnt out, never having a life for myself, I was working day, evenings, overnights. I was always feeling so burnt out. So for me, I needed to find something else that helped me along the way, where being proud of myself in such a way where, okay, well, what kind of job am I going to look at? What's my future going to look like? If I keep going the way that I'm going, my body's going to break down. And quite frankly, I mean, healthcare, you can only take so much of it before you start really getting injured terribly. But I mean, at the same time, is when I was actually thinking of it, okay, what are the pros and cons of what I want to try to do? And basically to not feel so burnt out. So whenever I went to Willis and looked for different things, like I was going to look like at the executive business administration, that might be my next step much later on in the future. I wanted to try to do something where I wasn't going to be working day and night constant. So for me, it was more, I needed to try to do something to better myself. So what actually put that all together is the fact that if I was looking at my daughter's life, I really wanted to focus more on my home family life and actually be happy. And I find if you're always working around the clock and working like 4 or 5 jobs like I was for about 16 years of it, so to finally sit down and settle down and have a family life and spend time with your family and learn, okay, well, what is it, that's going to be able to get me there so I could spend more time as well with my family, was to return to school, do cybersecurity analyst, which frankly, I had no background at all, none whatsoever in IT. So for me, it was the be all end all for me.
Good. Good. Well, that's just awesome. One of the comments that floated by was "you rock." Another, you're so. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Sherry. And I know that we're going to be hearing more from you at events like this in the future for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And now we're going to start to move into the part of our event that draws in some expert insights on the future of work. And who better to provide expert insights on a topic like that than someone representing one of the leading AI firms in the world. Fathom AI is an Australian startup, and our special guest today, Jessica Brown, is in charge of operations in the Americas. And what Fathom AI does, actually, maybe you can probably speak to it better than I could. But Fathom is an organization that I encountered through an enthusiastic dialogue that I was having with actually one of your panelists, Jessica, my friend Maria McKay. So I will stop talking about that, other than to emphasize that in your own background, Jessica, you have a passion for integrating different inputs like the future of technology, drivers from the world of art, social impact. And these different factors really come together in a nice blended way. And just having learned more about you and more about Fathom and the great work that your company is doing, I will stop talking and let you describe to everyone everything that's going on.
Thanks so much, Darren, and thank you, Rima, for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Darren mentioned, I work for a company called Fathom AI. We are a group that uses analytics information about the workforce to help identify how are AI and robotic technologies going to transform the workforce in the future, and what are the intentional decisions that organizations can make in order to ensure that individuals are able to transition into roles and viable career pathways in the long run. As Darren mentioned, so to be honest, I'm the token American on the panel. I did want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Ohlone Land in Oakland, California. And as Darren mentioned, my background has covered public service, social impact, and specifically looking at big technology trends and how that is transforming business. And part of the reason why I was so attracted to work at Fathom AI is because of this really critical human first lens for how we're thinking about how work is evolving in the future. So I'm definitely going to be bringing that lens into this presentation, and really looking forward to diving into conversation with an incredible cadre of women on the panel immediately after this. So if we could please move to the next slide. One of the big things that we'd like to talk about at Fathom is that we're not really in the future of work, because the future of work is happening right now. This is really more about the evolution of work. And our COVID-19 context has certainly brought that very much to the forefront. If we can move to the next slide, please. We're seeing that, you might have seen this this meme in the past about what is it that's causing digital transformation across your company. The reality is that COVID-19 has forced the hand of a lot of companies to really
expedite the ways in which they're adopting technology in much more rapid ways. If we advance the slide, we'll see that there is, here's another image of a group of people in a boardroom kind of talking about, oh, that's a much further afield thing. We don't need to worry about it, while the impending doom of the COVID-19 wrecking ball is coming through. And if we advance the slide once more, we'll see that there are actually 3/4 of leaders who were interviewed in July of last year responded that they have really rapidly increased their digital transformation as a result of this current context. So what does this mean? What are the implications for this? What we're seeing is that, as we all know, there has been massive disruption in the workforce as a result of the circumstance of COVID-19. There are a lot of people who are jobless. There are a lot of people who are out of work. And we're seeing that this is particularly true amongst women in the workforce. As was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers, there are many women who have responsibilities that they're taking on outside of traditional work that is causing them to need to exit the workforce. And we're seeing that this is especially true for women of color. What we're seeing on the screen here represents the unemployment rates amongst women of different ethnic backgrounds across Canada. And as of November of this past year, white women have the lowest rates across the board. So why does this matter? We've been talking a lot about women and women in cyber specifically, and I think it's really important to ground in the fact that when we are talking about women, we are talking about it in a very comprehensive, intentional way from a multi-diverse backgrounds. We think about women in an intersectional manner. So not only has COVID-19 impacted the women of the workforce in terms of joblessness and long-term unemployment, but we're also seeing that women are in particular being impacted by the digital transformation trends that are occurring across the board too. We're going to get into that in just a moment. If we could advance to the next slide, please. So the reality is that a lot of organizations are really not prepared for the level of transformation that has happened thus far. A number of the speakers earlier today already talked about the fact that there are gaps in the workforce. If we can advance to the next slide, we'll see that this same study that was performed in July of last year, a very significant portion of people have said that they don't feel like they have the right set of skills in order to support this transition. Moreover, because of the fact that all of this digital uptake means that there are more technologies that are being diffused, it also means that there is more cybersecurity risk associated with this new environment that we're entering into. And if we advance to the next page, we'll see that a study that was actually performed 2 years ago anticipated that there would be a deficit of cyber roles this year of 8,000 people across Canada. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, so the reality of this is more extreme. Globally, we're looking at a figure that's closer to 3.5 million, which is crazy. And Fathom's data actually shows that because of this digital transformation that's occurring, we're likely to see an increase in need of cyber and what I'll call cyber adjacent roles of roughly 100,000 positions. Wow, that's a lot. That's crazy. So the question is, how do we bridge this gap? This is a huge chasm. If we can go to the next page, we'll see that the fundamental view of Fathom, and I think this is shared by a number of people on the panel and certainly of Willis College, is that in order to move forward constructively, we have to think about the people first. And the good news is that although there are these big gaps in the workforce, there are also tons of people who have the skills, the expertise, the ability to transition into these roles in the future. So as mentioned before, this is something that Fathom is very passionate about, is very much at the forefront of the work that we do. And we actually have an example of an organization in Australia that utilized this approach to hire people into the cybersecurity profession in a different way. And on the next page, we'll see that we were working with a banking institution in Australia. They were going through robotic process automation. As a result of this, the CIO expressed challenges, frustration of the fact that they were not able to find people in their cybersecurity roles, and they needed more folks. Also, as a result of this RPA, they were seeing that there was going to be some pretty significant transformation amongst the accountant roles within the firm. So there were individuals who were potentially going to be out of work. There was a need in the cybersecurity angle, and utilizing our platform and the objective understanding of the skills that are required, the tasks that are performed, and sort of removing our own orthodoxies about what it takes to become a cybersecurity professional, they were able to transition individuals from these accounting roles into the cybersecurity level 1 positions within a short amount of time. So this is extraordinarily powerful. And we're seeing this pan out. I know some of our panelists are going to speak to this too when we move into that session in just a moment. But we can be much more open-minded. As was mentioned earlier, we can open the funnel about the type of individuals that we can invite into the discussion, and that actually makes us better. The last page that we'll share here sort of speaks to this nuance around the fact that there already is a lot of diversity of perspective coming from the cybersecurity field. So if we're going to sort of manage this circumstance that we're currently in of a lack of cybersecurity professionals, huge amounts of unemployment and long-term unemployment, in particular for women and women of color, and bridge this gap of the fact that the need for these types of roles are growing, we have to take a step back, be objective, and think really in an open-minded way about how we can invite more people into the workforce. So given that we're running just a few minutes behind, I'm going to suggest that we actually transition right now into our conversation with the panelists. While we're getting that set up, I'd love to just poll the audience really quickly. If you could please share what country you're calling in from, and also what industry you work in, because that will give us a sense of the types of people in the audience, and will also help to sort of shift the type of conversation that we have. And if the other panelists would like to come off video and join me on stage, amazing. Welcome, welcome. So we're seeing some folks from private education, some cyber professionals, some IT and project managers, education. This is great. Wonderful. Well, why don't we go ahead and dive right into this? I'm really, really excited and thrilled to have this incredible cadre of women with me on today's panel. They have collectively an immense amount of experience, not only directly in cyber, but supporting clients who are working in this field. So what I'm actually going to have them do is do a brief introduction as I ask an initial question to each of them, so that we can keep things moving swiftly. So to start off, I'd actually love to turn to you, Maria, to ask your perspective on what is your definition of the future of work?
Thanks, Jessica. Great presentation. As Jessica and others who know me well know, I think about the future of work in a slightly different way than maybe others do. For me, the future of work is an inextricable link between three things. One is work itself and how it's evolving and changing how it's happening, who's being asked to do what, how the nature of work is being altered. But then it's also very much linked to the future of space. Why does work need to happen in an office? Why can't it happen in a coffee shop? Why can't I go and work at Fathom's office, or Fathom comes and works at KPMG's office, or I go work in a Government of Canada office, and vice versa? Space should be fungible, especially now. And finally, all of that also is inextricably linked to the future of security, especially cyber. Because when we start to work differently and do different jobs in different ways in different places, we have to be on the lookout for threats to who's impacted most. Is it women, Black, Indigenous, people of color? Is it a risk to productivity and being able to actually do work? And is it a risk to our safety because threats present themselves in new and different ways? So the future of work for me is those things: work plus space plus security, especially cyber.
Thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate the comprehensive perspective you have about how work is going to evolve in the future and what actions we need to take in order to support that. I'd love to actually ask this same question of Tracy, given the incredible startup that you're working on and your work in this area as well.
Well, I see us achieving some form of gender balance in the near future, 10 years, by achieving high education for young women. So I see the future of work emerging to be a better balance and inclusiveness of men and women, because I think we're going to do a better job in the funnel, as Bonnie was talking about earlier, of getting girls involved. I've worked as a remote worker for almost 30 years, and I've always really loved it. So I think now society has had a taste of this. I fully agree, you know, location independent is a big thing. So that means the future of work is now within the grasp of remote communities and people who have been in small and rural towns and trying to live a, you know, a balanced life outside of the grid. And here in the new world, I think that'll be achievable.
And one of the things that you mentioned in one of our prior conversations that really resonated with me when talking about the future of work is this notion of like creating an ecosystem. And in particular, when thinking about it through the lens of education, which again has come up a lot during today's conversation. But can you elaborate a little bit on your work and kind of how you're thinking about creating that that pipeline and that funnel into these types of fields in the future?
Well, I think one of the things that I noticed through the pandemic that I wish we could have solved, and I look forward to us doing better, is really centralizing the supply of content to reach a much broader audience, as opposed to asking one teacher to become an expert at so many things and deliver it to, you know, their small cohort that year. So if we can do better on the resourcing of content and then make it more widely available to more people at a young age, we take the onus off the schools for delivering this, and we maybe look back to the technology community who has all these tools that need to be taught to bring in the skills. So in the bigger ecosystem, bringing technology companies, software companies, cybersecurity companies down to the, you know, the very early stage in children's lives, so they become really accustomed to them, like products like SafeToNet, one of the leading products for kids' safety, you know, getting it into the hands of kids that are in kindergarten and teaching them how to take care of their safety, being a whole ecosystem of resources brought to bear, as opposed to the individual locations trying to find everything for the next generation of kids coming up.
There's definitely themes that resonates really well when we're talking about what type of skill sets are necessary to be successful in the future of work, and the fact that you need to build in interest, passion, resiliency, and kind of plant those seeds early in order to ensure that people have that we can look at the workforce with greater fungibility as a whole. I'd love to next turn over to our cyber experts on this panel to dig a little bit deeper into specifically within the realm of cyber, what do we mean about cyber in the future of work? What is the role of cyber in the future of work? And I'd love to hand that first over to Dana.
Pleasure. Thank you, Jessica. So future of work in cyber, wouldn't we love to click our heels and know and predict what that would be? That would be ideal. But one of the trends that is just so fantastic right now, and it bleeds back into a little bit of what you were saying, Tracy, is understanding that it's not just a technology challenge, right? So coming into this industry and encouraging people to not only shift or even to grow into this industry, that it's not just based on technology skill set. Mm-hmm. Certainly an understanding of how data is enabled in our networks, how we as people are using the data that's flowing across networks is exceedingly important. So that overall ecosystem, that overall end-to-end knowledge from process to governance to procedures is key, working with our technology partners. So future of work is encouraging our work streams and our hiring practices to be looking beyond the technical skill set. The way that the earlier conversation, which was really, really great to listen to, how she shifted careers a few times. It will be ideal going forward in future of cyber, knowing that the sophistication of attack is exploiting how we use the technology, how we use the data, anticipating how that's happening, and encouraging all of our support networks to have that awareness beyond simply being able to have the key foundation, which is coding and fingers on keyboard to code.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I'd love to have Sarah kind of build on that thinking. In particular, if you could bring to bear some of your experiences from the defense spaces that you come from, and or the entrepreneur-focused work that you're doing with your current banking employer.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Jessica. What I'll say is that I think, Dana, I agree completely with what you just said. I think, if we're not looking at cybersecurity as a business risk, then we're missing the point, right? And if we're not thinking about what information is important to the business and how the business needs to leverage that information to create opportunities, then we're certainly not getting a fulsome picture either. And I build on that only to say, we want to be looking, I think, more and more at two different ecosystems. An external ecosystem and an internal one. And internally, I think more and more we're looking at the concept of fusing our understanding of cyber. So whether that's with internal fraud, external fraud, financial crime, anti-money laundering, and particularly privacy practices, we're going to need to take that sort of all threats view to more appropriately understand where our risks lie and how we can manage those in line with an organization's risk appetite. So that's the internal piece, and I'd say the external piece is something that we're seeing in the financial sector for sure, but I think smaller and medium-sized businesses that we work with at BDC are certainly facing this, which is your third and now fourth party risk, and supply chain risk is becoming so important. So you can no longer say you're secure if you put up a big fence around your shop and lock your data center. There's an increased reliance on cloud suppliers, particularly, and we're seeing downstream effects of breaches and incidents happening months after the fact in ways we can't control. So I think it's more and more important to understand where that risk lies. And to Dana's point, I do think it comes back to the data. So where's your information? Who has access to it? And making sure that you're setting up good governance around that.
I love that because it speaks to both the breadth and depth of thinking that we all, as organizations, as individuals, need to take into our perspective as to when we're thinking about cyber, what does it actually mean? This actually relates well to a topic that you brought up previously, Dana, in one of our conversations about whose responsibility is it for cyber? Like where does that reside within the organization? Can you elaborate a little bit on your thinking along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly if we look back, security was often a silo, or it was often we're not sure if it should fit under technology or under information, a CIO, or maybe sometimes it was even under a CFO. Now an organization is much more of a horizontal, right? So we are now seeing DevSecOps or SecDevOps depending on which way you want to look at it or you subscribe to. Privacy is part of our organization's security audit committees are looking not just on the compliance requirements, but the audits relative to cyber. So in a lot of ways, cyber is that one that has to touch all, and our ability to influence our fellow organizations, to influence other organizations or third parties is how cybersecurity is being risen or being raised, is a better way to say that, within all of our organizations. So it's not just silo anymore. It really is part of a change management process, part of an incident response, but also part of audit, part of a go-to-market strategy. How much detail are we giving? Right, so almost, I would say, every single facet of our organizations is having to recognize what is our cyber risk to what we're each doing, and how does that translate into a business risk for us? It's reassuring to see that it is occurring, and I'm intrigued to see how much further we go in the future for it.
Absolutely, and it gets to that sense of responsibility and the fact that there needs to be, or by design, there is more ownership and responsibility for that risk. As Sarah was saying, multiple layers deep in an organization when talking about supply chain, when talking about subcontractors. And so really having that, again, holistic view and really taking intentionality in decisions that are made to ensure that these sorts of risks are not moving forward. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit back to this concept of women in cyber. And this might seem like a basic question, but I think it's important for us to challenge, like, why does it matter? Why do we care? You know, the latest numbers I saw that, you know, somewhere between 10 to 20% of women are in cybersecurity roles in Canada right now. Besides a desire for equity, why should we care? And anybody's welcome to chime in here.
I'll take a stab at it. I think we need the balanced perspective of both genders at the table, that the care and kindness and nurturing themselves that women are accustomed for needs to be a voice at the table in policy design, in you know, thinking through problems. Our attention to detail is awesome, and we wouldn't have something reflective of society if it wasn't gender balanced.
Yeah, and if I can chime in from a risk perspective, and there's a number of studies, so I'm kicking myself that I don't have the names of the studies at my fingertips right now, but please do Google. There are a number of studies that actually indicate that risks to an organization are heightened with a lack of diversity. Right, a lack of a diverse view coming into their organization. And as a female part of that, we are, you know, in a lot of the network designs that I'm working with clients, we look for that adversarial aspect, right? Adversarial SIMs, adversarial tactics, to ensure that we're looking from across domain, across perspective, so we don't miss anything, right? We don't look, we often don't just take one word, we get a second opinion, a third opinion. Adversarial systems allow that. Having gender diversity for all of our interactions, whether it be code development, incident response, pen testing that Sherry mentioned earlier, ensures that we are mitigating our risk. So I really just think that's the key approach is, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to de-risk our organizations when we know that right now, with all of us at home, operating technology-wise and remotely, we have to. It would be silly not to.
This is Sarah, and I think that it's an interesting discussion to have, and I'd maybe respectfully challenge a little bit of what Tracy said, only to offer that I think diversity, when we're thinking about diversity, and we're thinking about equity, and we're thinking about building more balanced teams, whether that means having more women at the table, more non-binary folks at the table, more, you know, Black, Indigenous, and people of color at the table. I think what we really need to do is not limit the perspectives that we have access to, and rather than focus on specific gender traits, which and I totally do understand where you're coming from, Tracy, but I would just encourage us to maybe break down some of those preconceptions and instead look to just the value that individuals, based on their experience and based on their expertise, can bring to a table. And once we've expanded that and created space for people, I think we're going to have a much richer discussion, whether that's, you know, looking at a technology stack, whether that's looking at how we address business risks and cyber risks specifically. So I would just offer that as a contribution.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd love to sort of turn this now into, so I think that's a pretty compelling argument for why we need this. Obviously, I am already bought into this idea, but for those of you on the panel who are working directly with clients, what do you think the hindrances are for them adopting more of this diverse mindset when thinking about either cybersecurity alone, or when thinking about how do we bring in a more comprehensive group of individuals into cyber? Maria, I'm not sure if you have anything from a public sector perspective that you might share here.
Yeah, definitely. There were two questions in there. So the first comment is there's bias and stereotypes about who's suitable to do certain kinds of jobs, and that my fellow three panelists just gave all kinds of perspectives on why we need to have a more diverse cyber complement of people. Cyber risk itself is diverse. It's difficult to predict. It's growing. It stands to reason that as you need many professions to participate in understanding, anticipating, and preparing for, then you need people from all kinds of different backgrounds. But we're not always open to that. We have our own biases, so we need to get at and unroot those biases. So how do we potentially do that? Well, you and I have been working together on using data as a way to do that. And so one of the questions, I'm not a cyber professional in any way, so I'm not speaking from that perspective. But in terms of finding people in an organization or in society who could be excellent candidates to become cyber professionals, that if I go back to what I said about the future of work, future of space, and future of security, if the future of work is shifting and what people do inside of organizations is changing, we need to, if we're going to take a human first, people-centric approach, discern how the work of specific people will change, and then figure out how we're going to help them be productive and be able to feed themselves and their families, et cetera. And your example that you used at the beginning is an example that I know other organizations have looked at when they say work is shifting out of, say, the audit profession. We don't need as many people who are focused on finance because of the introduction of RPA and extreme automation, but we want to find a future for those people. What are the potential alternatives for them to undertake? And cyber, in many ways, in a past analysis we've done, is that. But the inertia associated with, first of all, saying we do have an issue, we do have a concern about what people are going to do in the future because the nature of work has changed because of COVID and because of digital transformation. So it's a sort of a combination of opening minds to where biases may have existed, plus using data and analytics to say what's the art of the possible, and then incorporating some or all of what my fellow panelists just shared about opening space for people who may not have traditionally been in cyber, women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, non-cis people. We need to make more space for everyone in the future of work, and especially something as important as this. One perspective will not, perception, lead to success in this area. So we have to sort of combine all of these elements, and the most important thing is not to get grounded in inertia that will prevent us from moving at all.
So let me ask a follow-up question to the group that kind of points this a little bit more clearly. Do you think that our current COVID-19 context and the digital transformation and the growing gap between the need for professionals and what is out there, do you think that that is going to be enough to spark people to action, to actually shift behavior? Or is it going to take something else?
I'll always speak. I think the need has not caused the reaction that we want so far. We have to do something more aggressive to entice people in. And I think that, mentorship is one thing, but even just exposing young minds to the huge possibilities that exist in cyber as cyber digital and cyber as cybersecurity. But so many people, so many young people just don't even get exposed to the 900 jobs there might be out there, nor do they necessarily get exposed to digital in construction or digital in manufacturing, digital in carpentry. Like, they don't see how the baseline digital skills and the understanding of the ecosystem of technology is going to empower them for whatever. And they don't even know whatever is. So I think we do have a long way to go, and no one person, no one education body could do it, but everybody could do it if they, brought the kids to work a little bit more or something.
Yeah, I agree. So your question, Jessica, if I understand it correctly, you're wondering if the acceleration caused by COVID is really, and therefore the resulting digital transformation that has occurred in majority of businesses is enough to compel a shift towards more females, more diverse workforces. And I would say no. Right? The digitization has really shifted us. It has, but in some ways there has been such a mass amount of work to be done to support that digital transformation, to enable businesses shifting their workflows to cloud, to service providers, to just being enabling of their workforce to be remote, that we have slipped back into habits that enabled us to move fast in the past. Whereas to your point, Maria, of shifting out of our biases takes a little bit of extra work. And that extra work would be where we would be bringing someone new onto the team and showing them that there is a place in our team that's predominantly non-diverse. People that have worked together very well as a team, it often takes much more effort to encourage there to be a new voice at the table. I think all of us can share stories where we've been the only female at the table, or someone of any or any diverse aspect at the table. That took extra effort. It took somebody at the table welcoming us. It took someone asking us for our voice. It took someone listening to our voice. And I, in my experience, but it's just my experience, I don't know that this past 12 months has allowed that to really occur. I would hope that in a moment of reflection, we can say, but it probably should have. So maybe we need to do a better job of that going forward. So I know the mentoring is a big part of it, Tracy, whereby we're trying to expose other people of diversity to see this is kind of a fun job. I know you don't see the fun job on TV, right? We're not really highlighted in any TV shows. It's usually someone of male with a hoodie in their mother's basement. We want to see what we do on a daily basis, and it's kind of fun. Actually, it's really fun, but show that to other women. And ideally then we shift that bias that you were mentioning earlier, Maria. But unfortunately, I don't know that COVID and the shift to digital has really allowed that so far. Not yet.
So I was
really interesting.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as we're getting close to wrapping up, I'd love actually to get some questions coming in through the chat screen, and then I'll would love to have you follow up, Sarah, as those are coming through.
I was going to make a bad joke. I was going to wear a hoodie today to sort of like lean all the way in. But, just to kind of build on what my colleague said, and I agree with it. And I think, we have an opportunity now to, I think from a really tactical perspective, change the way we network in light of this sort of enhanced digital shift. And so I think that there were some macro themes that my fellow panelists touched on, but maybe to just touch on a couple of micro ones. I think one thing that has happened through the past year is that we've become a lot more comfortable reaching out to complete strangers online as an acceptable way of breaking the ice. And I think what that does is it builds a community that might not have otherwise existed, where people can see themselves reflected back in roles that they might not have done in the company where they work, which is, you know, maybe an environment that they may have had access to in 2019 to go to Starbucks with you know, the people on the floor that you work in. Well, now the floor that you work on, you know, is a little bit bigger. And so I think from a tactical perspective, in terms of getting, you know, folks into roles in cybersecurity or in technology more broadly speaking, you know, we've got a space now where folks should, if they're interested, reach out to folks that might have a similar experience to theirs and are working in careers that they may be interested in.
A great recommendation. And I'm gonna put a request out to our dear host to see if she's seen anything come through. I'm not seeing anything right now in the chat, but as we're waiting for that to come through, I'd actually love to turn it back to the panel, kind of along the same lines of what you just articulated, Sarah. What can we do now? Like if this big you know, global context is not going to spark the type of change that we need, what are the really specific things that we on the panel, individuals in the audience can do today, this week, this month, in order to instigate this type of change that we really want to see?
I have an idea. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'll throw it out there. I mean, if you just turn around to the kids and the young people and the, you know, the 18, 20-year-old women that you know in your family network and engage those conversations, it starts a dialogue. It's, you know, talk about where you see the future going, where the opportunities are for women. I know myself, I didn't care about cybersecurity until I built an e-commerce company, and that motivated me. But if they're interested in lipstick or they're interested in auto mechanics, like whatever it is, if you dialogue, you know, where tech is going to be, where the opportunities are going to be, where the vulnerabilities and risks are going to be from a cybersecurity point of view, if everybody did that, we would start, you know, some curiosity forming. And then would come the questions, I think, and then would come the intrigue. Because without that around a young person, you know, Ramona's daughter is 15 years old, of one of our speakers just earlier, and she didn't have any tech influences. So it would be hard for her to want a tech job. So go ahead and influence everybody you can.
Can I add to what Tracy just shared, Jess?
Please do.
I really like that, and I'm going to have it a takeaway for what to do with my 5 nieces. But the thing I was going to suggest is related to, again, back to this use of data. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about Fathom is that Fathom enables us to look across an organization and understand who's doing what, from a gender, from a race, from an age, from a location perspective. And as we get into these digital transformations and start to predict where emerging technology is going to change the nature of work, what we're going to find is the people who are most impacted are women in heavily manual jobs, Black, Indigenous, people of color. So starting with leadership of organizations with which we're working to go and say, you talk about inclusion and diversity in the public, in the media, whether it's government or a private sector organization, but as you embark on this change, the people most at risk in your organization are those people, and you need to have a plan so that you can actually live up to the values of your organization. So maybe it's having a digital coffee with the CHRO or CEO, COO, whatever, in organizations that you know, to get them interested and excited in this potential issue, and you know, start to get them motivated for seeing the vision for change.
Dana, do you have any final thoughts or kind of recommendations for folks in the audience?
One of my last thoughts that I just build on what Tracy and Maria have said earlier is share your excitement with what your role is. and maybe that's where you were trying to go, and I think that's where you were starting to go as well, Tracy, is I genuinely really enjoy my job, and I've been in the cybersecurity industry for a long time. Sharing why, right? I've got daughters, I've got a son. Sharing with them, they often roll their eyes and say, yeah, I know. That's okay, they roll their eyes a lot. But it doesn't mean we stop. And I think to the point of in building change is often going to just be small steps until we hit a tipping point. And those small steps of change of talking about why should we care about the privacy on one of these things? Why should we care about who has access to our data? I know it's a free service, but why should you care as an individual? And then when you're working for a corporation, whether it be in manufacturing, in a trade, in a desk job, in a finance, what have you, having a greater appreciation for how the data that you're interacting with might impact the company negatively, or how you can ensure that nobody can take advantage of you or take advantage of the aspects of your company, is something that we can all just take pride in. And when that becomes part of our overall process, we no longer ask why we put seatbelts on in the car. We no longer ask why we have locks on our doors, sometimes 2 locks, right? Those are part of our operating process right now. So I'm often minded that small steps will lead to those bigger items. And that would be just one area of share why we enjoy our job, share what we get to do, share where I think my career might go, because I'm not near done.
Amazing. Well, I know we have some powerhouse panelists that are busy ladies and need to move on to their next gigs. So we'll wrap this up. I think super grateful for all of your contributions. This has been a really dynamic conversation. Excited about the nuance in the discussion and some of the challenges that were posed on the panel as well. I'd say just my final thought is we got to act now. Just really driving that urgency. If it's not COVID-19, we got to step up our game because we're falling behind as it is. We can do it. I'm confident that we can, but let's jump all in. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just an outstanding panel discussion. I don't think I've been at an event where I've been fielding so many great thumbs up and comments on my mobile phone because I guess I've been prolific at sharing my mobile number around. With the transition from that excellent panel and the razor sharp insights that were being offered up by everyone throughout the conversation, we will now introduce everyone to another Willis College grad. And Adwa Adu is a cloud infrastructure, should I say specialist? Should I say just smarter than I am when it comes to cloud infrastructure? Let's just leave it there with Transport Canada. And of course, we're very proud to share that Adwa has in her background, graduating from the Willis College CyberSecurity Analyst program. But in addition to all of the great work she's doing at Transport Canada, Adwa is putting into effect the acting now to effect change. And in fact, she's a co-founder of an organization called She Leads Cyber, which is a group that is dedicated to providing inspiration and support in building for minority female talent in the cybersecurity and digital fields. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Adwa Adu. Oh, Adwa, we can't hear you. No, we still cannot hear you. No, sorry.
Adwa, I wonder if your headphones are causing the issue. It doesn't look like you have any plugged in, so maybe we could try unplugging those. Oh, okay.
No, that was not it. Okay. And it doesn't appear to be anything on our side that we can do to enable them.
The other suggestion would be if you could try unmuting the speaker on your computer. The little, on mine it's F1, so up on the top panel there. Unfortunately not. All right, so maybe what we'll get you to do is one last shot. If you just go to your three dots in the bottom, there is a switch audio function, and just check to see what's connecting there. If not, maybe Darren, we could go to Christine and then come back later on.
No, I'm the one muted.
There we go. I unmuted you.
Thank you. Would that be okay, Adwa, if we came back to you a bit later on? Okay. Okay, great. Here I am saying two introductions in a very brief period of time, but I'm delighted as well to introduce the president of Perennial Talent Incorporated, Christine Lamothe. Christine is someone who works in the field of helping basically candidates find compelling careers. And you know, that's one of the highest areas of consultancy that a person can take on, connecting people to rewarding jobs. But in addition to that, Christine is the host of a podcast. It's a renowned podcast called Skills of the Future. And I think even right at this point in time, Christine, you are in the midst of a series of podcasts that are entitled HR Game Changers, Applying Skills and Competencies in the World of Work. So, you know, a better fit with the theme of our event today couldn't have been timed. And so I'm very happy to turn it over to you, and let me also wish you a very happy birthday today. And as well, thank you for obtaining the letter of congratulations from our country's Prime Minister. Well done on that.
You're quite welcome. And he's a strong supporter of women, as you know, Darren. And right now in Canada, we have over 200,000 women unemployed because of COVID. So we can't afford to lose women in the workforce. It is so important, especially, you know, during COVID, where women have dropped out of their careers to look after their children and look after, you know, their parents. Thank you for that introduction, Darren.
Thank you for
and thank you, Rima, Willis College and KPMG for inviting me to speak on cybersecurity skills, trends, and building careers. Our company focuses, I would say the core of what we do is competencies. So we've been spending a lot of time, I would say, in the last few years, developing competencies in cyber for a lot of the financial institutions and telecommunication organizations. And just at the start of the pandemic, we started to do a podcast series with men and women leaders in cyber, because they were hit hard, and we were curious to know what they were facing in terms of challenges and some of the critical competencies that they felt were really important. And I've heard a lot today about competencies from Dr. Tang and Sherry and Jessica and the panelists as well. And I wanted to share what they had to say about soft skills to succeed in their field, as well as other studies that were conducted in that area. And I'm also going to talk about the importance of clearly defining competencies for successful performance in cyber roles. What I found interesting in my discussion with women cyber leaders is that they felt that soft skills were very important. And without these, and I heard that today in the discussion, it can really put your career mobility at risk. Not that we know technical skills are really important. And as you know, there's a shortage of technical skills in cyber. But without soft skills, you can really stall or miserably fail in your career. And I guess that applies not just to cyber, but other industries as well. Next slide, please. According to a McKinsey report, 40% of employers said that a lack of soft skill is the main reason they have difficulty filling entry-level vacancies. The issue is also prevalent in cybersecurity. As cyber threats, as you know, continue to grow in sophistication, organizations face a persistent challenge, really, in recruiting skilled cybersecurity professionals. Next slide. The CISO leaders I spoke to identified a whole series of skills, but the top 5 that came out in terms of soft skills were those: analytical, critical thinking, which supports problem solving, communication, both orally and in writing, teamwork, and continuous learning. Next slide. But really the top 3, that came through not just in my discussion with all of the leaders, but also with respect to other studies that have been done in this area. So communication, teamwork, problem solving. Next slide, please. These 3 competencies were also identified in a 2019 survey of IT decision makers, which was conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They found that 70% considered communication to be a scarce skill. It wasn't often existing among cybersecurity graduates. And more than half struggled to find candidates strong in collaboration and team leadership. Failure to develop these skills really has a serious impact on the effectiveness of graduates once they enter the workplace. Next slide. Organizations that we've talked to and that we've worked with noted that soft skills like the one mentioned are critical for new hires. One survey by a security company, I think you're probably very familiar with them, Tripwire, found that 100% of respondents considered soft skills to be important when hiring a security team, and 21% even went so far to say that they were more important than hard skills. Next slide. So let's talk about teamwork. And this was mentioned in a lot of the discussions we've had today. The ability to work well with a team of individuals is as important as being technically savvy. Interpersonal soft skills really are hard skills to master. Help create, I think, a very cohesive team and environment for effectively applying cybersecurity. Excuse me. Oh my God. Okay. Effectively applying cybersecurity technology and practices. The ability to work as a team, to me, is as essential, because without that, how can you manage in a team? Because cybersecurity is really, rarely handled by single individuals. When we talk about problem solving, we also need to talk about analytical and critical thinking, as it forms the very foundation, as you know, of effective cybersecurity work. And many graduates and entry-level employees face significant obstacles troubleshooting real-world systems. The ability to apply critical thinking to analyze cybersecurity situation and be able to communicate this to others is really critical. Finally, communication and writing skills are essential for translating technical insights into value for a company. Whether by communicating threats and trends to business management or by writing and implementing user-friendly cybersecurity policies to protect an organization's information system. How many times have I had to deal with IT professional and could not understand what they were trying to tell me when I asked them a question? So the ability to be able to speak in layperson's terms so the person at the receiving end can understand that is so important. We know some of the barriers women face in breaking into cybersecurity include a really male-dominated culture that's often been not as welcoming as it should be to women. The lack of mentoring and development in the field and job qualification, which can keep, as many of you said, women from applying for a position that would allow them, to grow beyond their skill set. But, having soft skills can really help women because one must be able to communicate, problem solve, and work in team. No matter how technical somebody is, if you can't communicate in a team atmosphere, you won't be successful in the long term. And what I found as well is that interviewers are often willing to overlook a weakness in the technical skills and experience they thought they wanted when they really connected with candidates. Another reason why the mastery of soft skills is so important for women, I think, in the industry. When you consider, the common barriers for women in cybersecurity, such as job qualifications and lack of development, soft skills can really help women navigate those challenges. Women can emphasize their problem solving, their collaboration abilities to impress hiring managers and use communication skills to campaign for mentorship and development in the sector. Because many people in information security lack communication and other soft skills, this gives professionals, especially women, with these competencies, unique opportunities. For women looking to acquire the technical skills needed in this field through an educational program, it's important that they find a program that includes soft skills. The key to success to me today in evaluating an educational program is how much soft skill training they are offering. So look for that when you look to choose a training program. And when I think of some of the traits required for women in this field as well, this field is really for any woman who is intellectually curious and willing to think outside of the box, unconventional thinking, and are prepared to engage in a lifetime of learning. I've heard that through the CISO leaders we interviewed. This is so important. You need to keep up with change. Agility is critical. One of my first podcast guests that I had on our cyber skills series for our Skills of the Future podcast was Rima Aristocrat. When I asked her, what are the main challenges being faced by the industry right now with respect to cybersecurity skills development, she said to me, there are not enough women currently active in cybersecurity field or in the classroom? The logic really is a simple one, right? When you think of it, more women students in class results in more women graduates, which leads to more women in the field, and the end result is more professionals to fill the vacancies. And she was telling me that the military learned decades ago to include and encourage women to join. Academia and industry have to put the measures in place to do the same with different things such as financial incentives, marketing campaign, awareness training, retooling the learning environment to be more attractive to women and adapting curriculum and instructional design to be more gender inclusive. Rima, you're right. You're always right when it comes to women in cyber, and I so agree with you. But I would add another element that I find is critical for women and men as well, but which is a great segue to my last point, is the importance for organization to clearly spell out the competencies required for successful performance in cyber. Next slide. And here are some benefits. Why is that important today? And as an aside, in my conversation with a lot of the cyber leaders, a lot of their organization will identify, a job description, what's required, and they'll identify the certifications required for a given job. But they often don't take the time to clearly define the competencies required. And really, competencies are all about how people should behave to achieve expected results. Having competencies, to me, defines the requirement for successful performance in a given job. What's to be expected? You've created a common language that everybody can now understand when you articulate the competencies required for success. It helps an organization to engage and retain their people. And lastly, what I found, it really facilitates objective decision-making. Recruitment, hiring, placement, promotion decisions are made much more objective when you use competencies to define job requirement. Employees are hired, assessed, developed, and promoted based on objective criteria rather than subjective preference or unrelated factors such as seniority. And it has been proven to work in terms of removing biases from a selection process. It also helps when you're using competencies in a selection process by removing those biases to also help in terms of increasing diversity in the workforce. Next slide. So really what a competency is the knowledge, skills, ability, and other characteristics that are defined in observable behaviors that is needed. So how will I know it when I see it? So that's important when you're looking at developing people in a given job. They need to understand what is expected of them. You need to be able to see it when they're performing so you can provide the feedback required for them to improve and engage more in their role. So should also always answer that question. How do I know it when I see it? Next competency, slide, Here's an example. I just wanted to show you a quick example of what a competency looks like. And continuous learning is a critical competency in cyber as well. And as you can see, It defines various behavioral statements that are required for different levels. So maybe at a junior level, you're developing, and these would be the behaviors expected of you in your job. But continuous learning is required not just at an entry level position, it might be required in all of the roles within your organization. So you need to have behaviors that reflect that functional level. So from intermediate to advanced roles to mastery, competencies help in terms of clearly understanding what you mean, by that. Next slide. So when I look at all of the various cyber roles that exist, in the career, I think that in every cyber job family, if you could take the time to define those critical competency, technical and non-technical, you can use these to help you for staffing. You could use the competency with respect to performance management, giving feedback, identifying the training that they need to address the competency gap. And I think number one is career pathing. Career pathing is a question candidates often ask when they go for a job interview. And once you've done that, you could path all of the roles within a career that people need to follow and look at the competencies that and the education that would be required to attain those particular roles. Next slide. So as I said, we've been doing a lot of work with financial institutions as well. And this is just an example of an analyst and a senior analyst where they might be sharing similar competencies, but the proficiency level is different. For example, problem solving. At a junior level, you might just need a proficiency level 2, but when you look at a more senior analyst, they would need a level 3. And if you look here, these would be all of the behaviors required in order to be effective. So I think it's important to take the time to define that, to help people understand what's expected of them. And doing so, as I said, will remove a lot of biases in your talent management process. So the need for skilled, trained security professional is only going to get vaster and more urgent. So now is the time to bolster the workforce with women. Inducting more women in cybersecurity space will help bridge that gap. Women are the future of work in cyber.
Great, and thank you very much, Christine, for that excellent presentation. And I would surmise in my new life in the realm of higher education that a lot of what you presented could help to inform a cybersecurity curriculum as well. So, and I think now what we'll do is transition to the panel discussion.
All right.
We do have, of course, we, again, it was people not named Darren Jones took care of this, but Kelly and Adwa specifically have worked out the technical difficulties that were there. So we're thinking right after this panel, because we're having the panel discussion on exemplary careers in cyber, see her and be her.
Mm-hmm.
And after our various expert panelists will walk through their career journeys in cyber, then it will be a nice way to flow into Adwa's presentation.
Okay.
Darren, may I interject? Normally was not in the agenda, but I have to do something. We said the cybersecurity should be a fun. Okay, panel, join me, unmute yourselves. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
Christine. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, guys. I'll never forget the day the pandemic started on my birthday last year. So thank you, Rima. Thank you, everyone, for making this day special. Thank you. Today, I have the pleasure of facilitating our next panel discussion, See Her, Be Her. And they will tell you how to be her. I have 4 exceptional cyber leader guest panelists. Maybe I should call them cyber warriors because they really are warriors. These women are formidable role models for all women who are in this field or who are contemplating pursuing a career in cyber. They know what it's like to overcome the barriers to success, and they will share their story with you today. The challenges they face and what it takes to overcome them and succeed. I feel so privileged to have this opportunity to engage them in what their challenges were and what they've done to be able to not just survive, but really conquer their career. So let me start by introducing Jenny Doe, Chief Security Officer at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Welcome, Jenny. Where are you, Jenny?
I'm here. I'm just unmuting myself.
Okay, let's see.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you. We also have Allison Atkins, Vice President of Cyber at Scotiabank. Welcome, Allison. Are you there, Allison? I know she's there, but where? She's lost in cyberspace somewhere. All right. We'll move on to our third panelist, which is Priya Servani, Global Information Security Officer at Fira Capital. Welcome, Priya.
Hey, Christine, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's so great to have you, Priya. And our fourth panelist is Julia Scouten, Senior Manager, Cybersecurity Services at KPMG. And she's also co-VP of Public Sector Relations for DND and Canadian Armed Forces Women in Defense Security. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, pleasure. It's so great to have you here with us, and I know you're very busy women. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So let's get started. As women in cyber, what were the greatest challenges or obstacles you've had to face with, and how did you deal with that? I'm going to start with Priya. Could you share that with us?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think, I mean, we've all kind of, I think just not women, everybody goes through challenges in their life, but we just have a little bit of a little extra there, right? So just to give you a little bit of a background of myself, I have been through 3 countries. I kind of studied in India, did my first job there, then moved to Dubai, did a couple more jobs there, and then have landed here in Canada and have been a few jobs here too in leadership roles. So it's a journey over a couple decades that I've been in security. Started at the turn of the century, Now, obviously, the security field has evolved over a period of time in these last 20 years. Where we stand today is a much better place, where it's kind of security's got a seat on the table, in the boardroom as well. But that wasn't the case 20 years back. So I think that itself was one of the first obstacles where you would just not, security wasn't important enough, in itself as a domain. And then coming from a woman, it obviously becomes less important for people. So, to just be able to sort of battle that, and also being underrepresented, right? Because even now we're talking about these numbers being low, but at the time there were just handful. Like I've done my bachelor's in statistics. So I was in a class of 30 with just 2 girls. I've done my master's in computer applications. Less than 1/3 of the class was girls. And then I've been, when I did my CISSP in 2000, I was told I was the first female actually across Middle East to do that. So, so that again was, when I used to go in conferences in a room of 300, you would just be 2. I would be like 1 or perhaps 2 or 3 more with me, right? So it's always that number of being underrepresented or not being taken seriously. I think that just always has played over the years, more in the early years when you're a little bit more junior. But I think in terms of coping with it, you almost learn through that, this is what you need to change. And this is where you need to be doing better, being a good role model for others to sort of follow. So that just meant that, a few things that I had as part of my work ethic was just to have solid work ethic, be professional, take a no nonsense approach to things, because that's where you kind of come across as, you mean business and not just here for fun. I think that makes it a lot more easy for people to take you seriously and kind of give you the credibility. And then to your point, some of those hard skills that we needed to gain earlier to do some certifications were key. Soft skills, as Christine, you shared, were like the big ones across the journey. You kind of go through these to learn and, see people around, irrespective, because there weren't many women, but there were, of course, there were successful men that you could look at and say, okay, what makes them successful, right? So all in all, I think, it's just learning through your own journey and kind of improvising at every stage that has helped me kind of reach where I am today.
Thank you for sharing that, Priya. A true pioneer in your field. And it's always more challenging when you are. Jenny, I'd like to hear what you have to say with respect to some of the challenges, and obstacles. Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you, Priya. I can relate to a lot of the things that Priya was talking about. The other dimension is I'm a mom, I'm female, I'm also a visible minority. And I think some of the challenges and struggles were associated with things that I couldn't control or that I didn't want to. Like, I want to be a mother. I didn't want that to be a choice. And in those cases, I think what helped, I was told by a VP of a global firm, I remember at one point asking for accommodation. They wanted me to work on a file. It was 6 weeks of travel. I had 4 children at the time, 2 who were under the age of 2. And I said, well, I'd like some accommodation to work more remotely versus being on site all the time. And the VP, who had 4 children of his own, responded in email, I get it. I have 4 kids. What is she doing working, let alone working for this firm? So,
unbelievable.
Exactly. And I couldn't believe that occurred in my lifetime. Like, I could get it in my mom's lifetime, but to me, that was, and it didn't end very well for me with that firm. However, the message that I have to say is my ability to get over it and to move on, right? Like, there will be challenges, and to recognize that, and to have the self-confidence, which I think is also another challenge for a lot of us women, is having the self-confidence to say, no, that's not right. I'm not willing to accept this, and to speak with our feet, and to have the courage to do so, because it's not always obvious when you need the income. And there are times where, and you have to gauge, are you going to suck it up, or are you going to say something? And I found those moments, I think, the most difficult. And I still struggle, but I believe, and I continue to work on, having the courage and choosing the soft skills to impart the message, not abruptly, but tactfully.
So important to have our voice heard, and especially something like that, that really is shocking in today's climate to hear that. You're right. Heard that, when my mom was breaking in, or some of my mentors. So having the courage to speak up is really important. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. Julia, would you like to share some of your challenges and obstacles you were faced with?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Jenny and Priya, for sharing your experiences. I really, really connect and can relate to exactly what you said. So my experience, I was reading a Forbes article a few years ago, and it mentioned that only 10% of cybersecurity are represented by women in the industry, and that there's a problem in retaining them because of burnout, lack of career advancement, and of course, industry culture. I then really thought to myself, I'm like, how could that be, right? Like, cyber is so interesting. Why would anyone want to leave it? And then it dawned on me that pretty much all the men in my industry had surpassed me, and a lot of my female colleagues had actually left cybersecurity altogether. And then I really started to look at why that was. So I'll give you an example a few years ago of a colleague I had who was an acting manager for a highly technical operational team. So she didn't have a technical background or even one in cyber, but she was well organized, had great analytical skills, and amazing leadership qualities. She was decisive, confident, and very capable to lead that team. And when her time was up to act as the manager, she then had to compete for the position. And guess what? She didn't win it. She wasn't successful. And it was because she wasn't considered technical enough. So after that, she obviously left our team. She left our department completely and left cybersecurity behind. And then I actually had a conversation with her, and I asked, like, what happened? And she said that she felt her non-technical skills would never be valued in this industry. That devastated me at the time, and it still really bothers me all these years later. And I've also faced the same scrutiny. Like, I've also been told I was too technical for some jobs and not technical for others. And it's always been a challenge to justify my skill set and wonder if I was good enough. But I'll tell you, the most influential person in my career has a PhD in English. I learned more from her, like primarily on how to communicate business impact and risk than any other course I've ever taken in my entire career. And I personally think that we need more people like her. So how I'm trying to overcome this challenge is I am working really hard on finishing my MBA. I'm trying to take on more leadership positions to gain experience and to really seek out roles where I could finally be on the other side of the hiring table and say to someone that your skills are needed, your skills are valued, and we need more people like you. So I think in order to tackle the issues within cybersecurity, we need a whole range of skill sets and backgrounds, and there's plenty of room for everyone.
Absolutely. And tenacity, that served you well. You never quit.
That's true.
Good for you, Julia.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Allison, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Fantastic. Okay, good. I have the headset here, and I think it's probably a fortuitous stroke of luck that my microphone wasn't working earlier, because I was singing happy birthday quite loudly and quite badly.
Thank you, Allison.
So I think I was saved on that one. But happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, my greatest challenge or obstacle has been not looking the part, and facing subconscious bias in the role, and being scrutinized and judged. And I think for many of us, I think we've had to be just that little bit sharper with our knowledge and our nomenclature, and just that little bit crisper on the facts, because we were facing the judgment. And I think there's an assumption that you don't know what you're talking about, or an assumption that you don't have the appropriate background. And so I think maybe that kind of adversity has made us all stronger, right? So our mountain to climb was just that little bit higher. I'd like to pat my colleagues on the back for that. But I will share a short story as well that I think Julia reminded me of when I was in the UK, and I applied. I was contacted by a recruiter for an outside role, and I decided to give it a go. And I was waiting for the interview, and the person who was interviewed before me walked out, and it was someone that I knew, someone at the same organization that I was at, also applying. So sort of like, hey, gotcha, we shared that secret. And I was surprised that he was applying. It was a technical role, and he was a business guy, right? And anyway, long story short, he was offered the role and I was not. And the reason given to me was that it required a deeper technical background, and that he just was more technical. And he was not technical. He wouldn't have referred to himself that way. It wasn't part of his background. It wouldn't have been on his resume. He was someone from a business background that sort of fell into an IT security risk versus, me, where I'd had the cybersecurity experience, the, computer science background, pen testing. And so, clearly the recruiter, the interviewer really wasn't listening to what I was saying, wasn't reading what was on my resume, and nor were they looking at his. They were just seeing that it was a guy and making assumptions, right? And so, I was fine not to get the job, but to be told I didn't get it because I was the less technical candidate, that just didn't sit right,
I completely understand. When I first joined in my career, I was involved in printing, and I had come first in terms of my class, in terms of the exam, the interview, but they chose to give that to a man because I didn't have ink under my nails, and it wasn't even a run of press. So, we've been fighting this battle for so long, and it's like, when are we going to stop? So the courage, that you demonstrated, just like Julia, the tenacity, to stay with it, I really admire that. So thank you for sharing that with us, Allison. We talked about competencies in the different panels. I talked about it. Now I'd like to get your perspective. So let's start with Priya. What are the competencies or skills you think are most critical for women in pursuing a career in this field? Priya?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you covered a good lot, Christine, in your session just prior to this, right? Like the top 5 and then the 3 that you kind of narrowed down. Communication is the key, problem solving, teamwork, I think has been big. What I attribute to myself in terms of really, what has, besides all of these that are there is, I think one is just being assertive while being collaborative and empathetic about the business and the people there, right? So I think, as we just all talked about the tenacity or the challenges we've been through, we just needed to be a little bit more there. And it's interesting when they say that when a man is kind of assertive, it's seen as confidence or as like a strong person, versus if a woman does that, it's seen as being aggressive or ambitious or, so those. So it's just that you need to be there and yet be, in a way that you just don't kind of stand out like that. I think So, you know, being very, very collaborative, I think that's fundamental for all human beings. Unless you work well in a team, I
That's
don't think
right.
you can ever succeed anywhere. And same way, if you don't care for the other person, you know, being empathetic, you would never be able to kind of succeed beyond a point. I mean, you know, you might just be successful in initial roles. So that I think was one big one. And I guess the other part that I keep, you know, myself very, very, I take pride on is continuous learning, you know, because this domain of security is just so fast evolving. Like you just have to keep running to just be where you are, right? And that just means not just in technical sense, but also in business sense, in terms of the way the business is evolving and how you can sort of support that. And of course, you know, this constant learning of how the world's changing and how you as a person can evolve to sort of be more successful, be more impactful in where you are. So those, I think that you can just never take away, whether it's cyber or whatever field, as long as you keep yourself to that level. There's very, I mean, I have, at least in my experience, felt there are very, very good chances that you would succeed. You know, you'll have initial hiccups like we've all talked about our journey, but you know, we're all now at a stage where we can take pride of being through that because of some of these that we bring in. So.
Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing that. Jenny, what are some of the skills or competencies, you know, that you felt were most critical for you in terms of pursuing your career?
I was quite fortunate in my career to have benefited from coaching. And one of the first, and actually several times in my career, and continue to, either through mentoring. And the one advice that was given to me by one mentor was, seek to understand before being understood. And it was this notion of communication first is about listening. And observing, understanding the dynamics, really truly trying to understand, you know, either reticence or concerns. And that has been, I would see, and it continues to be a key competency that I share with my teammates. Yes, of course, you're going to have the technical skill sets. Yes, continue to develop all of those, but they're useless unless someone is willing to listen and to take them in. But in order for them to do that, you need to listen to them first. So that's a big one that took me a while, and I still work on. But it is one that was a big competency that I espouse and advocate a lot for.
It's a good one to seek to be to understand before you're understood, you know, to know where they're coming from. That's a great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Julia, what competencies or skill you think are most critical right now for women, and what served you well in terms of those competencies?
Sure. So the number one skill that has helped me more than anything in this field is actually the skill of networking. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, it's easy to say networking, but I'm going to break it down for you, okay? Or as best as I possibly can. So what I've learned that it's important to build your brand, be authentic, foster your network, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Cybersecurity is a small community in Canada, but a very, very powerful one. So I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm currently mentoring someone out west who's releasing from the military, and he was looking for a career change. So he was considering cybersecurity, but he really wanted to speak to someone about it first. Now, anyone that knows me well knows that I love what I do. And it's really easy for me to convince someone to join our field, right? But it was also just as important that he speak to other people to get a bigger perspective. So what I did was I posted something on LinkedIn asking my network what advice and guidance they would give to someone who was considering a career in cybersecurity. And it was simple enough, but the responses were amazing. Within 24 hours, he had numerous peers reach out to him, offering to speak with him, giving him advice on what school he should attend, even what programs, and what type of jobs would be available. A few even offered to hire him once he graduated. Suddenly his calendar was full of meetings from people all over Canada. And I was just so proud to be part of this community. And the next time I spoke with him, he told me if this is what the community was like, then he's in. So I'm happy to say that he will be starting next fall at BCIT out west for the Industrial Network Cybersecurity program. Yeah, super excited. So that's just an example of how powerful this network can be, right? But it is taking me years to build it, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But what has consistently worked for me is that when meeting with others, like what Jenny said, listen more than speak, right? Try to connect with them on a personal level by finding common interest and follow up with that person. This is a skill set I've had to work really hard at getting better at, and I've only been able to do it by practicing. And I also try to give back, and that's why I volunteer at WIDS, which is Women in Defense and Security. So I'm trying to give back to my community and my network as well. And to expand on that, I think it's really important as women that it's even more critical that we connect together and help one another achieve goals to positively contribute to attracting and, of course, retaining more women in cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Networking is so important.
Yeah.
And you know, it wasn't raised a lot in my discussions with the CISOs, but I'm really glad that you mentioned that because it is an important skill set to have. And like any skill set, you have to work at it to perfect it. So thank you for sharing that. Allison, what are some of the skill sets that have helped you in your career?
I think, you know, just thinking back to early on for me personally, I think getting some credentials was important, not because, you know, they certainly don't compete with real experience, but I think for me, it was just something that helped me have more confidence. So it was, you know, I've earned my stripes. I can demonstrate to the world, here's some independent verification that I do, you know, I know what I'm talking about, right? So that meant a lot to me, more in terms of just that confidence that it gave me, I think. You know, but as my careers progress, I see so much more value in the soft skills, and I think you know, curiosity is really important. So seeking out information, asking you know, questions, insightful questions, and really trying to understand resilience. You know, I think we've all now shared some stories where we've had some setbacks or been knocked down. We got to get up again, right? So that resilience and the passion and commitment to keep moving forward. Bravery, you know, I think we've got to be courageous. We need to be brave and find our voice and not be afraid to speak when we're the only woman in the room, right? I still today find myself very often the only female around a table of, you know, sometimes up to, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 men. Jenny's nodding. I'm sure that's what her world is like too, right? But you know, we've got to have that courage, and I think you know, I was going to say listening to hear and speaking to be heard, and I think it's very similar to what Jenny had shared. I think, you know, it does start with listening and treating our colleagues with respect, right? Because I think we get respect when we respect others, and you know, we may be keen to get our ideas out there and you get them on the table, but we still have to, you know, be respectful and make sure that we're not, you know, talking over folks or interrupting because we're feeling small or whatnot, right? I think it's really important for us to listen and make sure that we're being very thoughtful. Negotiation and influencing skills, I think, have been really critical in the types of roles that I've been in, and I've learned that, you know, sometimes a win comes from, it means accepting some compromise, right? So I think, you know, as sometimes we feel as females that that's an uphill struggle and we need to have this ferocity and you know, keep fighting for the point, but the win can actually have a little bit of compromise, and you still have to see the greater picture, right? That you're on the right path or your initiative's moving forward, even if it doesn't look exactly as you first hoped, right?
Okay, thank you for sharing that. My last question to the panel is, what career advice served you best in this field, and what would you recommend to women today to be successful in cyber? And because I have you on, Allison, I'm going to ask you to answer that first.
Don't let fear hold you back, right? So, don't be afraid to apply for a role, even if it doesn't look, like the perfect fit, or, don't be intimidated. We have to get out of our comfort zone and step up for opportunities. But in doing so, I think it's very important to be true to ourselves, right? Because authenticity is truly important. And I think early in my career, I felt maybe I needed to try to fit in and be one of the guys, right? And that was the way to succeed, but that never works. You really have to be yourself, and and find the rapport that you can with your colleagues. But I think not giving power to our excuses, not sometimes maybe we're getting in our own way, assuming there is a bias there, or assuming that we're not going to get a chance, and we can't give into that, and then most of all, I would say that the advice would be support your fellow female colleagues. Us women, we need to support other women,
other,
right?
yes.
We've got to support each other. This is not an exclusive club that some of us have made it into, and we're trying to, be the only one. It's not a turf territorial thing. I think we're stronger together if we, if we pull each other along.
Great advice. Thank you, Allison,
Welcome.
for that. Jenny, what advice would you give to be successful in this field?
I'm going to share an advice that was shared with me. One of my very first bosses, and I think it's a boss that I've shared with Allison and Darren, told me very young in my career, you are the CEO of You Incorporated. And as the CEO of You Incorporated, you need to make the decisions that best suit You Incorporated. And what that did for me was kind of take that third party dimension, out of it. It's like, oh, wait a second. It wasn't this question of kind of expecting it to happen to me by some miracle. It was really this, no, I'm accountable. I'm in charge. And as the CEO, I can decide what I want my organization to look like. And it was such an empowering advice that I still use and that I continue to share with all my staff and with anyone I've had the pleasure of coaching. And it's one that follows me, has followed me. I think I got in my 20s, and that I still continue to use. And don't ask me how old I am now.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Julia, what advice has served you well?
Similar to what Allison said, actually. So I noticed an interesting statistic a while back that said men will apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, as where women will only apply when they meet 100%. Like why? It is true. I've done it. Okay, like, we lack such confidence going after the roles we know deep down we're qualified for, right? I've certainly done that, right? I've hesitated to even apply for jobs until I'm like, yeah, I can tick every box. Anyways, years ago, I had a director who told me, get really good at applying for jobs so that when your dream job comes up, you're ready. And that's my advice to others. Get really good at it. Get really good at the application process, communicating your skills, and the value that you bring to a role, and to always seek feedback, right? So I want to share with you an example. All of you know I currently work at KPMG, right? But what you may not know is that I just started about 6 weeks ago. I actually came from the federal government, and that's where I work for. Yeah, I was there for like 21 years. Anyways, the point is I applied for this job right before Christmas, and the job poster stated that they were looking for a manager or a senior manager. And I was writing up my application as a manager. But I remembered that statistic, and at the very last second, I changed everything to senior manager. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen, right? They won't hire me, and I'll at least find out what competencies I need to be a senior manager, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. What happened instead was that I got a call back right away, followed by an interview and then an offer. And that leap of faith is what led me to where I am today. And I'm so glad I made that final change. So yeah, thank you. So
great advice.
Yeah, take that leap of faith, have confidence that you're qualified, get used to applying for jobs and getting that feedback, ask for that feedback. And for every job that I've been offered, I've probably, see, I got people calling me, I should have.
Okay.
For every job I've been offered, I must have applied to 5 that I didn't get. So just keep at it.
It's a numbers game, right?
It is, really is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
And last but not least, Priya, we only have a few minutes. What advice would you share and what has served you well?
I think, everything that Jenny, Allison, and Julia said, are very, very relevant. So I'll just sum it up pretty much in what I always believe in and I share. It's be you, believe in you, and do what you love to do. I think if you are just to the point Allison raised, if you're authentic and if you just bring yourself fully into your work and, be just yourself, and similarly believe in yourself, right? To the point that Julia raised, right? You just don't wait for being 100%, just take it. And then the last one I think is very critical for everything. Again, it's do what you love to do. It's not because cyber is HEP or cyber is most paid job these days or whatever that drives you to cyber or any other domain. I think it's very, very important that you are happy with what you're doing, because that's where you succeed and that's where you bring yourself that credibility that others see in you. So that just would be, do at least just that kind of summarizes everything that we've all said.
Absolutely. If you do something you love, you will always excel. You should always work in your area of strength. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, Allison, Jenny, Priya, Julia, for joining us on this panel. See her, be her, sharing your experience, advice, and your great insights on what it takes to be successful in cyber. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was that was outstanding. And Jenny, I also remember that advice from that same boss, and I'm pretty sure that was the first time that the three of us, yourself, Allison, and I worked together, not the second time, because I believe it was the first time. Yes. That gentleman was the best boss I've ever had, for sure. So yeah, if anyone's looking for a job and he's the hiring manager, I'm happy to help put someone forward to him. An outstanding leader for sure. And Adwa, I see you smiling there. I hope that all of the connectivity issues had been addressed.
I think I'm live now.
Excellent, excellent. So just to very briefly recap, Adwa is a recently graduated student from our cybersecurity analyst program, working at Transport Canada as a cloud infrastructure expert there. But what's also extremely compelling is that she is the co-founder of, and I do not want to quote this incorrectly, She Leads Cyber, which is a group that is dedicated to providing inspiration to minority female talent. So a cloud infrastructure expert and an entrepreneur and mentor. That's quite a combination of roles that you're fulfilling. So glad that everything is back there to get you all connected up, and take it away.
Thank you so much. I know we're running short of time, so I'll just summarize a lot of what I wanted to say, but I have to first start off just saying I'm so glad to be here. It's really an honor for me. I started off my cybersecurity career after attending a forum similar to this held by Willis. So it means a lot to me to be here, to be able to share my story, and hopefully if somebody else out there considering it or just starting out, stick with it. It will work out for you. But before I go any further, Rima, because of COVID, as you know, I haven't been able to come by the school. I just want to use this opportunity to say a huge shout out to you. And just share how proud and grateful I am to be a beneficiary of all the hard work and the commitment that you have in promoting and pushing for equity in the field of cybersecurity for women and women like me. So thank you for that. Once again, I'm Adjoa Adu. I'm a proud graduate of Willis's cybersecurity program, and I currently work with Transport Canada in cloud infrastructure and security. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the community organization that myself and a few colleagues have started, which is She Leads. And it actually just kind of summarizes everything, a lot of what the other panelists and presenters have said today. Another one is for me, when I started studying cybersecurity at Willis, the sense of community and the networking and the support that I received from the staff there, male and female. So we have our male allies. I know when we're in the field, it could be a challenge sometimes, but definitely, at least in my experience during my learning stages, I had a lot of allies there. Ranjit Matthews is one. He was always pushing, talking about networking, talking about the importance of volunteering, talking about the importance of applying for the jobs and getting out there to the various cyber forums and cybersecurity groups locally, engaging, exposing yourself, talking to people. And I come from a background, my first career was in education and international development. So talking is not my problem. I'm okay with that. But really kind of the technical side, I wasn't comfortable with. So even though I feel like I'm an outspoken person, I feel like I can get along with people, because I didn't have that, I really did feel unprepared and unwilling to put myself out there. But similar to what Allison said, once I actually went further on in my studies and I started to get some credentials, it gave me that validation, it gave me that confidence to move forward. So that brings me to some of the work we're doing with She Leads. It's basically an organization where we're focusing more on young girls between the ages of 9 to 18. Because another presenter said it earlier, I think it was Dr. Tang, she mentioned that it's so important to get the exposure at an early age. And that's what we're hoping to do. So we're working with organizations like Boys and Girls Club, local community organizations, because we feel like it's really important. Yes, it's on one hand, once you're a little bit older, you could say, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to put myself out there. But when you're a young girl, you're just kind of figuring things out. The confidence might not be there. So we're trying to do more outreach and being deliberate in our outreach and going out to communities that may not necessarily have the exposure to tech fields and cybersecurity fields. So for example, newcomer communities. In my experience like this, my parents immigrated to Canada in the 70s, and I was born and pretty much raised here, but my parents were working class people, and the gadgets in the house were not to fiddle with. You can't break anything, so you might not have that exposure to it, But one of the first things that we did in the Willis program was we actually took apart a laptop and actually really understood all the parts inside. We broke it. So in our boot camps and our workshops, we try to do stuff like that. Just give that initial exposure, break it. Don't worry about breaking it. When you fix it, that's how you'll learn. That's how you'll grow. So those are some of the activities that we do. Aside from the mentorship and the workshops to expose the young girls, we actually work with the older girls and those just starting on their career like myself, who may have financial constraints, and we're topping up the mentorship with sponsorship. So this is all grassroots. We're just we put it out there in our social network. Hey, we have this boot camp and so would like to attend it. They're just starting out or they want to attempt their first certification. And it's amazing the support that's out there. And we've been able to help 2 ladies so far get their certification in cloud security, and also another lady get her Security Plus certification. We're hoping to do that, continue that with our boot camps for the younger girls and with summer camps this summer. So I just wanted to just kind of share the importance of supporting each other to actually build this pipeline, and the importance that I've seen of doing that at a younger age for these kids. And that's what we're trying to do with She Leads. Unfortunately, I can't see all the participants, so I really wanted to kind of find out where people were at in their stages of their career. But hopefully we can connect on Twitter, on LinkedIn, I'm there under Adjoa Du or under She Leads Cyber. So it'll be great to connect. And I know we have to wrap up, Darren, so I'm gonna just sum it up, but I know we'll have more of these events, and I would love to join again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adwa, and certainly I can promise that we will be hearing more from you at different Willis events too, not only this one.
Awesome.
And that was just such an excellent event overall. And Rima, you were sharing at the beginning, just how exhilarating it's been over the last 3 weeks to pull everything together. It's the dialogues that we've had leading up to this event have been outstanding, and I'm hoping that that everyone in the audience has enjoyed this event as much as we have, and have maybe had the opportunity to make some new connections with this roster of speakers and panelists that we put forward. And with the couple of minutes that are left, I just wanted to take a brief moment to thank all of the people who helped this event to come together in the manner that it did. Rima, your leadership, of course, for all of the speakers and panelists who were, were unhesitating in throwing their support behind the event. It was an embarrassment of riches to come up with the topics and come up with the speakers that we did. And as well, Kelly, I see your name on screen. You are the glue who held this event together to make sure that the logistics fell into place. You and I have worked on so many of these events in the past when we worked together, and this was really the first time I got to work closely enough with you to see how much hard work you put into this. And of course, the entire Willis team for throwing their support behind the event. My boss, Ramona, for having the patience with me while I diverted some of my time each day to help move the event along. And I also just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are happening in Willis's future that you will be hearing more about. First, we did make reference earlier in this presentation event that Willis is truly, a nationwide provider of cybersecurity training services with the introduction of the cybersecurity online course happening in this spring. In the summertime, in conjunction with a couple of our corporate partners, we will be introducing security awareness training that is more oriented toward the business world. And as well, going into the fall, we are anticipating carrying out some interesting benchmark studies that will involve local government entities, that will involve the healthcare sector, that will involve small and medium-sized business. We're not a consulting or professional services type of organization. We're looking to embark on these studies as a way of giving back to the community that provides so many outstanding jobs for our graduating students. And I was hoping we can get in under 5 o'clock. We just may have done that. So I'll turn it over to you, Rima, for some closing remarks. And thank you everyone again for making this such a wonderful few hours.
I cannot thank enough each and every one of you. It's been an amazing panel. The event speakers were outstanding, devoted, contribution was just amazing, and the topics were I cannot say enough. But I cannot thank enough my partner there. You were my partner in it. I could have never done without you. I thank you profoundly for doing this, and we're looking forward to many events. And as we talked about it before, entire team that we work together becomes this ecosystem, and we're going to work together for future events. God bless you all, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.